Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if Naruto joined Avengers? Before I start, please do support for more awesome content and subscribe my channel and like this video. Go support and follow the Neon Zangetsu for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story, link in the description. They say curiosity killed the cat. Did it? Did it really? Or, and I'm just being the devil's advocate here folks, was the cat simply so incredibly curious that it actually wanted to meet Teeth? That has been my philosophy ever since I was cursed with eternal life. If one is curious about something, and one wants to know about it badly enough, then one ought to know about it. Whatever the cost. Take universes for example. Who says we have to be confined to one? What divine edict states that we must never leave the realm in which we were born? Well, I don't know what kind of putz created that infernal rule, but I stopped following it a long time ago. After all, one has nothing but time and all the power in the world, one does what one must to avoid the dark dregs of boredom. So, after the first century, I got creative and jumped the shark, leaving the ashes of my world behind. Since then, mine eyes have seen worlds immemorial. Innumerable. I've been just about everywhere, now. I have held a cursed blade in my grasp soul edge and resisted what temptations it offered. I have battled the man of steel in hand-to-hand combat and emerged victorious. I have seen warriors capable of leveling entire planets with a single punch. With one punch. My boots have walked in the ashes of entire galaxies. I have shared drinks with both gods and demons alike, toasted to chaos and order in the same sentence, and danced with creatures of the undead. I have unlocked and since forgotten the secret of life, learned countless languages, learned to travel through the very fabric of time. Batted in giant suits of armor against creatures kaiju from another realm, purely for the fun of it. I have sailed countless seas and helped discover a legendary treasure called One Piece. Similarly, I have ventured under the sea and watched humanity tear itself apart. I've visited the afterlife and pranked the very gods of death themselves. That's what it's about, isn't it? Having fun, and when I can, doing right. Doesn't always turn out the way I want, but hey, I try. My body has discovered 1,000 different ways to kill, some even without using chakra. The elements themselves have bowed to me. These hands have held almost every weapon imaginable and even created a few learned almost every intricacy of war that can ever be offered. I have seen, and on occasion, started the apocalypse, then lived to tell the tale. Learned to cure almost every disease, break just about every curse except my own. Once, I even helped save an universe from giant mechanical squids, determined to destroy all sentient life. Mostly shepherds doing that, but I still helped a little. Yes, giant robot squids. From space. I shit you not. And these are just a few of my adventures in the great scope of things, not even the top 10. Of course, there was that one time I tried to recreate my past, my friends and family. Yeah, it didn't end well. My travels are many, my names, few. But if I had to pick one, a favorite amongst them all, it would be this one. The one I almost never visit, if only for fear of running out of things to enjoy here. Because if I run out of worlds to see and things to do, that means my journey will be at an end. And if it's at an end, that means it will be time to return. To go home. But I don't want that to go back to that empty world, devoid of life, airless and adrift, with nothing to do. After all, my friends, if there's one thing I've decided during this long, merry, insane journey of mine. I'm not going home. Presently. Steve Rogers, also known as Captain America, was about to jump into hell. All around him the air felt charged, the heavy crack of thunder rolling heavily in his ears. But he knew better than to hesitate, even in this storm. Tony, otherwise known as Iron Man, was already moments ahead of him, chasing after the Asgardian who'd just gone and kidnapped Loki. To Tony it didn't matter if this one was a friendly or not, only that he retrieved their lost prize immediately. Typical Stark. That both men had jumped out of a moving jet and could fly wasn't lost on Cap, either. It did make him a little jealous, though. I'd sit this one out, Cap. Natasha called from the pilot's seat. I don't see how I can. He called back, strapping the parachute onto his chest. Years of trained practice took over, securely fastening the straps to his body, with an ease born of years of repetition. These guys come from legend. Her voice was barely audible over the rushing wind. They're basically gods. There's only one god, ma'am, came the answer. And I'm pretty sure he doesn't dress like that. Steve, don't you dare. Too late. Without another word, he snatched up his shield and dove out of the plane headfirst into the storm. The world seemed to laugh at him, this flightless bug who'd leaped into his maw. Perhaps, had he lingered just a little longer, he might have received an answer to his impromptu verse, might have realized that someone had taken offense to his statement. Natasha sighed, jerking back towards the controls. Men. He's right, you know. A voice answered. But that's so rude, I most certainly do not wear the drapes. Only years of rigorous training prevented Black Widow from yelping. It did not, however, prevent her from yanking her gun out of its holster and training it upon the unfamiliar voice. A second passed. Then another and another and another still, her pistol still fixated upon the newcomer in the seat opposite her. Natasha blinked. Once. Twice. 3 times. "Who are you and what are you doing here?" she demanded of him at last, when she finally realized she wasn't seeing things. "I want answers. Now." The hand waved lazily. "Osu, I've been through this before about a dozen different times, so let's cut the dramatics." 2 fingers twitched, pointing downward. "Put the gun down, would you kindly? I'm not here to hurt ya, Tebeo. And you need to be flying this bird. So fly." Incredibly, she found herself obeying. In place of her co-pilot sat a young man, fiddling with was that a Game Boy? Yes, she realized, yes it was. A very old Game Boy, red and battered, looking as though it had seen better days. It even had an old Pokémon cartridge lodged in the back. This, she thought, was most certainly not the SHIELD operative who'd been there a moment before. He couldn't have been more different. His blue eyes remained focused intently on the handheld, paying no notice to her whatsoever. It gave her a chance to pay attention to him. His state of dress was almost comical in its absurdity and outlandishness. She didn't see a single matching piece anywhere amongst his odd attire. Old black jeans with light orange plating scattered haphazardly upon the joints and other odd places, the random bits of armor flowing up past a strange belt with little red and white spheres tethered round his waist and an equally strange meta-cylinder all the way up to an ebony chest piece, partially obscuring a shirt upon which the words, "I am awesome," were proudly stitched in orange lettering. If Natasha had to guess, he looked as though he just walked out of one of those eccentric anime cons. What was it with this guy and orange? And there, tethered to his back by a thick orange, of course it was orange. Strap and, somehow defying the very laws of gravity and physics themselves, was a giant sword. A giant metallic fleshy sword, complete with a giant eyeball. It screamed vile on an almost primordial level, and just looking at it made her head hurt. How he sat in the chair with that thing was beyond her and irrelevant. Snatching up her gun, she pointed it at him once more, only to find her hand inexplicably magnetized to the very holster she'd drawn from not a moment before. "Who in the—" "Just a second there, Red," he murmured distractedly, "I'm trying to catch this bugger without cheating. You know, it's just so much more satisfying when you don't use God mode for everything." Bright blue eyes, gazing fiercely at the device in his hands, his whiskered cheeks, pinked in an intense scowl. The pair of glimmering red horns jutting up violently from his otherwise pale saffron hair, lending him an almost demonic appearance as his fingers frantically tapped at the buttons. "Ha-ha-ha-ha-ha," he crowed proudly, shooting out of the seat with such force, he nearly banged his head on the ceiling in his enthusiasm. "I finally caught me as Aptos. Take that, you damn game. Meet thy master, Tebeo." With a triumphant roar he hurled his prized possession like a madman. Impossibly it didn't shatter, instead the small device caromed harmlessly off the hulls to land back in his hand, where he tucked it away moments later, grinning. Then he noticed her expression. "What?" came the frown. "I don't have a problem, Pokémon is perfectly respectable game for adults. Of course, it's nothing like Avengers in the actual world itself, but that got old after a while. Still kept some souvenirs, though, and I'm rambling, aren't I?" By now, Natasha was sorely confused. Try as she might, she couldn't draw her gun on him and pilot at the same time. In the end she was left glowering at the intruder. "Who in the hell are you?" she demanded of him again. Incredibly, this time, the rogue answered. "Ah," his hands clapped together once slowly, mockingly. "And now we get reach the heart of the matter. I'm Naruto, your average orange ramen-eating prank-loving dimension-hopping deity who happened to be in the neighborhood when I heard Stripes down there knocking my fashion sense." There was a silence. And then. "What?" I was quite offended. Naruto huffed, throwing his arms up in the air. "In all my lifetimes, I only wore drapes once, and that was when I was a teenager. I certainly don't wear them now. And quite frankly, I don't see the appeal. I mean, having anything long like hair or cape only allows you to get grabbed and—" Wait. Natasha shook her head, the motion sending her red curls bouncing. "Let me get this straight. You, a god?" "Yup." His head bobbed. "Came here. Because someone insulted your fashion sense. Also, yes. I intend to leave this plane shortly and kick his ass for said remark." "And how did you?" He looked at her as if she'd grown an extra red. "How did I what?" He followed her gaze to the now empty seat. "Ah, you mean the other guy. Your co-pilot. I took his place." "Biwa?" "It wasn't hard, really. Just a little temporal displacement, swapping his position for mine, and you have no idea what I'm talking about." "The god." Her deadpan was barely concealed. "So you've been everywhere." Natasha didn't believe him. Not for a second. In all her years, after everything she'd seen, she found it impossible to believe that God could be a smart-mouthed blonde with horns and a passion for cosplaying. She assumed everything bar that hideous sword on his back was quite fake. Ah, how little she knew. Oh, here, there, everywhere. The blonde yawned, lounging on the wall beside her. Dimension hopping gets a little boring after a while, so, here I am, once, this one happens to be favorite universe. I only stayed for a day, last time. Seems things have changed while I was gone. A hand banged harshly against the hull. Pretty sure the worst danger was a world war the last time I visited. Can't have anyone messing with a place like this, you know. I happen to like this universe, but since you're being such a stick in the mud about all this, I think I'll take my leave. You can't just walk out of the plane, the drop would. La 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 la, can't hear you. Naruto called as he stomped towards the still open ramp. You never take me anywhere nice. You what, that doesn't make any sense. Where are you going? For a walk. Then he dove out of the plane, cackling. I love dimension hopping. There's nothing quite like the feeling that moment. When you first pop into another world. Their faces, that's always my favorite part. Those first 5 minutes when they try to figure out who or what you are. Then they try to deny. They try to rationalize you away, explain you as some freak phenomenon, a product of science, the devil or something. Sometimes they like you, marvel as you aid them. Sometimes, they worship you like you're just that, a god. Those tend to be the awkward bits. Other times they try to burn you. The cult tried to the same to me, once. I can't quite remember the name of that place. Wait, now I do. Silent Hill. What they did to me was funny. I just laughed. What they tried to do to the same to a little girl, and no one deserved that. So I undid it. And them. And then their world, followed by time, then the very fabric of reality itself. It was the first and to date, only universe I destroyed, a place so corrupt and twisted that it didn't deserve to exist. Now it doesn't. And somehow, someway, when all was said and done, and that realm was nothing but atoms, I found I wasn't alone. In the end, I spared two individuals, two halves of the same soul. I adopted them both, not one, but two daughters. Two beings, one light and the other dark. I was still relatively new into my godhood at the time, so I sealed them away, placed them in stasis in a pocket dimension, until I could find some way to make them whole once again. Knowledge that I, alas, still lack. I'm not fit to raise them, yet. Perhaps no one is. But I digress. From Star Wars to Halo, Pokémon and DC to beyond, I've just about seen and done it all bar this world. I didn't stay long, last time. Wasn't much to see. But now as I ponder this entry, I wonder why I waited so long to come here again. My eyes have seen the cosmos, beheld all manners of wonders, and yet, I find myself almost wishing for an end. Almost. Once I'm done here, that's it. Zip. Zilch. Nada. Once I'm done here, I won't have anywhere left to roam, no more mysteries to discover. But that doesn't mean I won't have a little fun before I go. After all, no one told me I couldn't borrow things from other dimensions and never return them. Ironically, Alessa and her dark half-eye, simply call her Delessa, are two of the more gentle souvenirs I have brought with me from my endless journey. Take Killa, for example, he's a fine pet I picked up from the 23rd universe I visited. The last of his kind. He's a good boy. A very good boy. Oh, and one more thing. Fear the drapes. Fear them, I say. Presently. Tony Stark, also known as Iron Man, had just leaped feet first into hell. All around him the air felt charged, the heavy crack of thunder still rolling heavily in his ears overhead. He supposed the weatherman had a right to be pissed at him, now. Because he had, in classic Tony Stark fashion, just body tackled a god into a forest. That was new, even for him. Even so, he knew better than to hesitate, even in this storm, especially with so many long, pointy, branchy lightning rods jutting up around him just waiting for an errant bolt to hit. But the bastard was already getting up again, and he didn't look happy. Do not touch me again. Thor growled. Then don't take my stuff. Came the snarky reply. Seriously. What was it with this guy and taking his stuff? First he storms into the Quinjet, knocks him. You have no idea what you're dealing with. Oh, that was just 2C. Iron Man looked left, then he looked right. Shakespeare in the park. He waved an armored hand. Doth mother know you weareth her drapes? And I twitched. This is beyond you, Metal Man. Loki will face Asgardian justice. He gives up the cube, he's all yours. Until then. His faceplate clicked shut with a harsh clank. Stay out of the way. For a moment, it looked as though Thor would do just that. But Tony just had to get the last word in. Tourist. Big. Mistake. No sooner had he spoken than the hammer flew. By some miracle he was able to turn, but even then, that only resulted in Mjolnir catching him square in the stomach, rather than behind. Slightly less ungraceful, but a humiliating defeat none the same. Momentum took over mercilessly, ripping the suit from its feet and launching him through a tree as though it were made of tinder. In the end, Tony Stark landed most ungracefully on his back, his body sprawled out amongst the broken branches. Behind the helm, his features tightened into a scowl as he assessed the damage. "Okay, guess we're doing this the hard way." In response, the Asgardian raised a hand and his hammer flew to his palm. Tony frowned, eyeing the stout weapon warily as it emitted sparks. He really didn't want to get hit with that again. No sir. But he wasn't about to take a hit like that lying down, either. He was just preparing a witty retort when the third party came barreling in. "You? Not. Mocketh. Thine. Drapes." That was all Stark had time for before an orange and black missile cannoned into him from out of nowhere and drop-kicked him across the forest. Thor couldn't help himself, despite the severity of the situation, despite the fact that a newcomer had literally appeared out of nowhere and launched Iron Man clear through 3 trees, it was simply too much to bear. The moment he saw those mismatching patches of orange armor dotted around the young man, he could no longer help himself. He laughed. "What garish thing is this? You dress like a fool." The newcomer did not take kindly to that, no sir, he did not. "You know, I am really sick and tired of people continually mocking my fashion sense." Naruto snarled as he reached a gauntlet-clad hand over his back, drawing the massive Zweihander upon a shoulder. "First Stripes did it, now you. You got something to say too, Goldilocks." Now that massive tip swung towards Thor menacingly, its eye wide and wriggling. "You got something to say about the color orange, eh do ya, punk?" A dangerous smile lit those whiskered cheeks. As it turned out, Thor did, in fact, have something to say. "What foul weapon is that, man? I feel a sickening chill from thy arm." Naruto grinned. "Why don't you find out?" He had to give the gods of this realm some measure of credit, they certainly possessed splendid reflexes. At least Thor did. In the millisecond that it took him to bring his massive blade slashing downwards, Thor had already parried, his hammer deflecting a weapon that had killed so many deities before him. Marvelous. The man might not be his peer in terms of physical strength, but he was quite durable. And he could certainly take some hits. "You're quite strong. I'm enjoying this." Alas, the Asgardian wasn't done with the insults. "What are you wearing?" He grunted as they traded bruising blows, Mjolnir ringing harshly against the fleshy steel of Soul Edge, the forest jarring with each collision of arm and leg. "Perhaps thou art a court jester." That last kick was most certainly a joke. Humph. The next kick was certainly no joke, it caught him flat in the stomach and bent him double, melting his armor as though it were made of tinfoil. The breath rushed out of him in a dry wheeze, and he lay there on his knees, gasping for air. This didn't make any sense. Few, if any, in this realm were capable of causing him physical harm. The metal man had hurt him, certainly, but this was new. Finally, he managed one word. "What?" No, don't get up on my account." It took everything Naruto had not to laugh outright. "Take your time. I can wait." He did not wait. Scarce had Thor started to rise than that flaming foot found his face, catapulting him backwards with a decisive crack. A blow like that would have killed a mortal man. The god of thunder merely grunted, spun, and righted himself almost immediately. A thin line of blood ran down that strong jaw, spat out promptly as he laid eyes upon the blazing limb. His counterattack was just as swift. The Krang. Mjolnir descended with all its might, fully intent on wiping the irritating jester in Thor's mind from this plane of existence. This time it was not steel, but Lether that stopped the deadly crusher. Another boot flashed past the almighty hammer, concussing him in the head moments later. This time, he actually spit out a tooth. How had been kicked? The blonde was standing right in front of him, one leg currently deflecting Mjolnir, and he needed the other to stand on, so. What sorcery is this? No sorcery. Just some medieval jam. The whisked warrior hummed happily, lowering his still smoldering legs. Was he floating? Thor balked. It seemed as though he were. It's French for devil's leg, in case you might be wondering. Nifty little trick I once learned from a shitty cook. Not that his cooking was shitty, mind you, just hells, just forget it. His arms rose and fell in a helpless shrug. It's obvious you have no idea what I'm trying to say. Eggin with E. Thor growled back, clambering to his feet once more. I've more important things to do than entertain a child. Says the man who just got drop-kicked by this so-called child of yours. Naruto raised a leg. Twice. Come on, man. I haven't even used a quarter of my tricks yet. At least make me work for a win. Now there was a wound the Asgardian could not ignore. A shot right to his pride. He swung. Recklessly. Then Naruto headbutted him. Hard. Thor growled. Quasi lucky. Rasengan. The attack was executed as flawlessly as it was abruptly, with Naruto gripping Thor's forearm just as the original erupted from the earth and smashed down into him from behind. With a roar he slammed the spiraling sphere into his adversary's unprotected flank, demolishing both Doppelganger and Asgardian both, launching them away in a destructive sphere of annihilation. Before long, it was a mere pinprick of light in the distance, small, and growing rapidly smaller still. First rule of being a god, mate. Naruto called into the distance. Expect the unexpected. There was a silence. Well, he sighed at last, conjuring himself a glass of ale from nothingness. That's probably going to piss him off when he wakes up. Might as well enjoy a drink until he does. From his cliffy perch, Loki cackled and clapped his hands together, delighting in the spectacle. Brilliant. Well done. He was practically beside himself with laughter. Naruto shot him an errant glance and, seeing no other combatants on the field at the moment, shrugged. Meh, what the hell. Not like he had anything better to do. The lone thought carried him from forest to cliff, his feet alighting effortlessly beside the bemused trickster. Loki merely glanced up at his arrival, calculating, assessing him. And what do we have here? He mused darkly. I've not seen your like before. Who are you supposed to be, Chuckles? Shouldn't you be down there, helping your friend? I go by many, many names, but you may call me Loki. A frown creased his angular features. And though my dear brother may claim us to be such, we are not friends by any means. He cast a glowering glare in the direction Thor had flown as though he could somehow pierce him with it and spat harshly upon the ground. I commend you for embarrassing him, thus. Hey now, that's kinda harsh. I mean, if he's your brother. The rock pelted him in the head. I'm adopted, you twit. Naruto blinked, crouching down next to his fellow deity. Ah. Well, that would explain the total lack of empathy, there. So, what's your shtick? World domination. Destroying the planet. Correct me if I'm wrong, but now I'm getting a serious villain vibe off of you. No wait, don't tell me. You want to cover the world in raiment, don't you, an admirable goal? Loki just stared at him. It was the first one, wasn't it? This time, the silence was telling. Yes. Ah, world conquest, Naruto sighed nostalgically, swirling the vodka merrily in his mug. Global domination. I remember those days. It's too much work, son. You either whip the population into fear or kill them outright, and if you don't, they're always rebelling, and then that involves making examples of people and all sorts of nasty business. It's not worth it, really. Better to rule a small city than the whole world. Beats having to watch out for assassinations all the time. Loki frowned. He wasn't used to being lectured by someone who was his junior. Ah, how little he knew. I'm sorry, Waryu, exactly. Naruto finished his shot with a loud guffaw, slamming the glass down on the rocky soil with such force that it shattered loudly. He stood woodenly, swaying slightly on his feet. Even then his steps had purpose, a certain sway to his swagger that suggested he wasn't entirely wasted as he might seem. Name's Naruto. I'm a real god, sonny. The Asgardian felt his frown deepen. Somehow, I find that very unlikely. I can prove it, you know. To his disbelief, the horned blonde insisted on perpetuating this ruse. Just by looking at you. A scoffing laugh told him what the trickster thought about the chances of that. "Do tell," he drawled sarcastically, spreading his arms, voice dripping with vitriol. "Tell me my secrets, oh great Naruto." "Fine, you asked for it." Blue eyes glittered with mirth. "You're currently thinking how awesome my sword is and wondering where you can get one. Ah, but now you think I'm just telepathic." Loki twitched, but before he could speak, the deity plowed on ahead. "Let's try something more personal. Let's see. You're trying to conquer this planet for someone called Thanos. You happen to be the son of a frost giant, you the bed until you were 12, and you have a gigantic crush on a fine warrior named CMRHMRPH. Enough." Loki's hand clamped over his mouth and throat before he could get the last word out. "Blast you," he scowled at the smug bastard, "how did you doth it? How do you know these things? Tell me." In answerment, Naruto simply looked him in the eye. Those blue orbs turned white. "Careful what you wish for." And the world vanished. One moment Loki was trying to strangle him, the next he was staring down at the earth from space. Breath hitched in his lungs before he realized he could still breathe, still stare down at the glistening sphere below his feet. Earth, Midgard, in all its puny primitive glory, sprawled out before him. No, wait. He'd been mistaken. There were 2 Earths. Now 3. 4. 5. 6. 7. 8. No, now 9, 10. Countless words now, millions of them, realms innumerable. People, places, planets, some of them not even Earth at all. Just looking at them hurt, so many lives, so many events unfolding before him, so many feelings, pain, happiness, hate, love, greed, too many. No. He tried to look away, but an unseen force wrenched him back to it. No more. His body refused to obey. No, make it stop. Eternity stared him in the face and laughed at him as he began to break. Stop. When he came to, he was flat on his back, that freakish sword thrust mere millimeters from his face. A strangled whimper leaked from his lips. Naruto grinned. See? You just got a glimpse at where I've been. Everywhere. Would you please not do that again? He gasped, trying for diplomacy in the wake of violence's failure. I need to breathe. His captor simply smiled and shrugged, armored shoulders rolling easily. I told you, I'm God. Not the god of this universe, of course. He seems intent to let you guys screw each other over on a daily business. I should probably kill that asshole. As for me, I'm just somebody passing through. Although, he paused, frowning as he realized the man had all but admitting to wanting to enslave the earth. It didn't take omnipotence to see that Loki had a chip on his shoulder, but taking it out on an entire planet that was problematic. Do you really want to rule here? He inquired, taking Soul Edge away from his throat. Loki glowered at the blade. He could have sworn the damn thing winked at him. Still, the blonde was waiting for an answer, and he wasn't about to grant him the satisfaction of silence. Why are you asking me this? I don't know what you're planning exactly, but there's always another way. Soul Edge sheathed itself with a flourish on the blonde's back. Even then, Loki couldn't help but feel as though the blade were looking at him, as if it wanted to devour him. Try living with the humans. Naruto's words drew him back to reality, those blue eyes snatching his up, consuming them utterly. Getting to know them. You might find that some of them aren't so bad, trickster. Nonsense. For a moment, just a moment, his fingers twitched toward the offered hand. Then he scowled. Preposterous. Scoffing, he slapped Naruto's palm away. 'Tis easier to rule worms than it is to kneel in the dirt with them. Besides, it's what they deserve. That, or death. His fellow deity simply shook his head. No, they really don't. I've seen the ones who do. And what did you do? Loki challenged, standing. Did you mingle with them? Where was your mercy, then? My mercy, as you put it, lasted no more than an hour. For a moment, just a moment, levity left the blonde's face. Then I destroyed them. He said, and when Loki next looked, that friendly hand was covered in blood, fingers dripping red. They died by this hand. Every man, woman and child, every tainted soul. Snuffed out slowly, painfully, terminated with extreme prejudice. Do you know how that feels, Tricky? To bathe in blood, to flay them alive, to watch them burn, as they tried to make a little girl burn. Try as he might, the legendary trickster couldn't bring himself to look away from those gore-covered hand. What happened to her? I adopted her. Both halves of her. I'm sorry, what? She's here. A finger touched the air between them, parting the very fabric of reality with a single poke, puncturing it like a paper bag. The void stared back at him red and angry, but in that strange place between the worlds, he thought he saw a face. No, two. Two faces, two girls, trapped in slumber. One of them opened their eyes, pits of blackness glaring back at him. She smiled, and something in the smile broke him, took his soul to pieces and laid him bare. Loki yelped and scrambled back. Close it, he cried, backpedaling, close it. Oh, calm down, you big baby. Naruto laughed, swatting him on the back of the head. They're sleeping now. Haven't aged a day since. And those you killed. They're gone now. A wave of his fingers and the scarlet image vanished, the air stitching itself shut. The cult, the town, everyone. I destroyed their very souls. And their universe. Utterly. Have you ever heard of Silent Hill? Loki shook his head. I can't say that I have. Precisely. Those eyes weren't just emotionless, he realized, they were empty, like the void, all humor stripped away to reveal the uncaring entity beneath. Because Silent Hill no longer exists. All traces, memories, all of it, life, books, video games, gone, from all the realms. Destroyed at the beginning. Only I and two others know about it. And now, so do you. Loki gulped. That was an audacious claim, if such a thing could be believed. And as much as he didn't want to believe it, he did. Those soulless eyes said too much otherwise. Still, an entire realm. Gone. He tried to do the same, once. Only, this man had succeeded, albeit at great cost. It made him think, just for a moment. What would have happened had he succeeded in his goal? He held no love for Luffy's kingdom, but that was just a world. Here was a man who claimed to have obliterated many times that. What was he even doing speaking with him, anyway? He had plans. Great plans. Surely a bit of sentiment couldn't interfere with that. But enough about the heavy stuff. What about your brother? Naruto asked suddenly, diverting him. He got a weakness. Because I can hear him getting back up over there, his head tilted towards the plume of black smoke in the distance, and I'd really like to know how to keep him down before I have to pull one of my godbusters on him. The god of tricks actually cringed at that. He wasn't quite sure what made him answer the way he did, only that it happened. Pop-Tarts. Naruto deadpanned. No. Way. Quite. Loki sighed, resisting the powerful urge to bury his head in his hands out of sheer embarrassment. He has always been rather fond of the things since he found his way to Midgard. They're the only thing that can give him pause beyond that insufferable woman of his. And why are you grinning like that? This woman have a name? I believe she was called Jane Foster. Thor cares for her deeply. As he does this realm. A look of disgust crossed his face. Filthy planet. If you're thinking of using her against him, by all means, do so. You'd only make him even angrier. Wasn't planning on it. Wait. Naruto frowned. Wait, I thought this was Earth. Loki looked up, baffled. It is. The frown deepened. But you called it Midgard. I did. See, now you've lost me. Naruto shook his head, sending his bangs swinging. If it's Earth, a hand gestured wildly, then it should be called just that. Earth. No, 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 the trickster tried, sighing, it is Earth, but we call it Midgard. So it's not Earth. Yes and no. Oh, Odin. Loki could feel a migraine coming on now. You're incredibly infuriating, I hope you know that. Naruto grumbled. I try. Oh, don't look now, but I believe you have company. He was almost relieved when he saw the lightning bolt. Now he could be rid of this one and his infernal influence. Ah, hell. That was all the dimension hopper had time for before Mjolnir caught him square in the face. It was a very solid hammer. Bristled. So solid that it launched him into the ground like a splinter beneath the soil's surface, wedged him in the earth, and bring half the forest down on top of him. Just like that. Naruto lay there in the crevice for what might have been minutes, but it felt like an eternity to one such as him. In the time it took him to dig himself out of the debris and purge himself off those pesky pine needles, exactly 3 seconds, he'd come up with over 24 ways to disable Thor. Unfortunately, most of those were lethal. Well. He chortled, setting his nose. I didn't know Blondie had it in him. He hadn't thought for a second that a Rasengan would keep Thor down for too long, not someone like that. Especially when he was holding back. Now, had he blasted him with a Rasen Shuriken, the Asgardian might be out of commission for a time. But as things stood, he doubted a box of Pop-Tarts would calm the god down now. Worth a try. Oh, Thor. Sure enough, a bolt of deafening crack of thunder answered him. The stubborn Asgardian was indeed moving again, though he looked to be in quite a state. His cape lay shredded at his shoulder, armor melted, his flesh even a little singed, but that implacable deity was still alive. Alive and kicking, it seemed, holding his hammer high. And oh, was that lightning stemming from it, now? It was. Wait. Naruto flung up his hands up. I have Pop-Tarts. Lies. Too late, Thor rocketed forward. Right into a clenched fist. Now, to be fair, Naruto was a god. Even in a restrained state, his reaction time was many times those of a normal man, even without cheating and using something like the Sharingan. So when he set himself to it, it was only natural that those greater, even those of an Asgardian's. It was child's play to step up and insert his fist into the man's trajectory. It was just a punch, but that simple swing all but blasted the mighty Thor back into the woods once more. The low whistle echoed into the night. Fine. No tarts of pop for you, Blondie. More silence. Wait, I'm sorry, really. What was that? Did you say something? The ancient deity merrily put a hand against an ear, listening to the sound of snapping branches in the distance. My ears couldn't hear you over the sound of me kicking your ass, point break. Then he saw the hammer, lying at his feet. Fascinating. Such a shoddy owner, though. Anyone capable of wielding such a weapon knew better than to drop it the moment you got hit. Still, one couldn't help but wonder, how powerful was such a tool? He had many weapons in his repertoire, but he couldn't recall ever owning a hammer capable of calling down lightning. Curiosity compelled him to do what he did next. His fingers wrapped around the hammer's hilt. And lifted it as though it weighed no more than a feather. Huh. He thought it would be heavier, somehow. From his vantage point, Loki balked. Oh, here we go. Naruto barely noticed. He was more than curious now, he was positively delighted, and in his delight, he did something he'd never thought to do before. Grinning, he thrust it into the sky. Boom. The heavens answered him at once, a bolt of brilliant blue-white shooting down at his command. Naruto cackled, reveling in this newfound gift. He'd commanded the elements before, but the raw power of lightning here at his hands rivaled even those. A throaty laugh tore out of his throat. I have the power. But he paused, lowering Mjolnir and ending the light show. Wait. No. Sorry, wrong universe. You. Thor's voice boomed, reminding him of the persistent, insulting throwing enemy in front of him. Put that down. Naruto sighed and spun toward the noise, hoisting his new weapon. Honestly, if hadn't taken that jab at his outfit, this would have been over by now. Naruto was pleased, however, to see he'd caught more than a few twigs and pine needles in his hair. And he didn't look too pleased. Looking for this? Thou art not worthy to wield that, knave. He roared. Return it to me at once. For a moment, Naruto thought of doing just that. Poor guy looked absolutely desperate. But the prankster in him, that was another story. You mean this hammer? Yes, that. Unhanded. Oh, really? He gave it a toss at the strap and did a little twirl, bemused. See, I would, but it looks like I'm plenty worthy from here. Although, it is a little short for my tastes, though oof. Breath gusted out of Naruto's lungs in a savage gasp as a pair of repulsor beams slammed into his unguarded flank and slammed him face first into the forest floor. He lay there for a moment, blinking. For the first time since entering this universe he felt pain. The whine of repulsors grew louder still until he found himself staring at a red metal boot less than a foot from his face. Oh. Right. He'd forgotten all about him. Iron Man stared down at him, his grim facade somehow managing to look smug. He certainly sounded like it. Sure you're not compensating for something, big guy? Truth be told, Tony had been watching their little dance for some time now. Truth be told, he hadn't been sure if the newcomer was friend or foe. But if this guy was chatting with Loki like an old friend, well, that made him a bad one in his book. Wait. Something was wrong. The bastard was getting back up. And he was laughing. Now, Stark knew from experience that it was never, ever a good sign when the baddies laughed like that. For example, when the Ironmonger had laughed at him way back when, he'd promptly found himself on the south side of an ass-kicking. This was that kind of laugh. And so the Metal Man returns at last. Naruto laughed, dusting himself off. I was afraid I'd accidentally killed you. Sorry to disappoint. Outwardly he remained calm, inwardly, he was beginning to sweat. It didn't make any sense. He was certain this guy wasn't an Asgardian like Thor, and he'd just been hit at full power. Perhaps it was time to set old grudges aside after all. Need some help, Point Break. Stay out of my way, Metal Man. Thor hefted his newly recaptured hammer with an annoyed grunt, trying in vain to put the brief loss of his weapon from memory. This is my affair. The idea that this vagabond had managed to wield the full might of Mjolnir, capture its powers even for an instant, he shuddered at the thought. Just who was this man? Why was he here? What did he want? Was he truly a foe? For a moment, just a moment. He lowered his hammer, considering. Then the insufferable creature did it again. Elod. See? Point Break. I knew the nickname would stick. I will smite you myself. Honey, Tony scoffed, I'm pretty sure it was your ass he was kicking for the last 5 minutes. Let me have a go at him. Never. I will be the one to slay him. Slay, Naruto exclaimed, clutching at his heart. You wound me. I thought we were friends. We most certainly are not. Then come at me, bro. Surprisingly, they did, the both of them. For the first time since finding himself in the Marvel Universe, Naruto found himself mildly amused. Belsey, these guys were. He liked that. And he hadn't had this much fun in ages. What had started as a petty grievance against Earth's mightiest heroes was rapidly devolving into a brawl. Lighting and repulsor beams crashed around him, a harsh crescendo of blows, a battle waged not because he wanted to, rather, simply because he had chosen to. And for a moment, just a moment, Iron Man and Thor held their own. Their teamwork, though flawed, was enough to keep him on the defensive, and coupled with the fact that he wasn't trying to kill either of them, and his task grew exponentially more difficult. One could clearly see neither could stand the other, but still, it was worthy of respect. What Stark did next, however, took that newfound respect and spat on it. So, did your mother make that costume for you? He cracked wise as he blasted aside a limb. What are you supposed to be? A wizard. On your way to LARP? And a wizard to this, hotshot. Naruto twitched a finger and in the next instant, two things happened. First, Thor flew backwards as though he'd been struck, then, Iron Man found himself trapped in a full Nelson, his armor buckling beneath the god's grasp. It took his brain only a moment to find the answer. It didn't make it any less pleasant to realize that the blonde had yanked him out of the air just by moving his pinky. Alarm shrieked in his head as the suit's chest began to buckle with alarming swiftness. Jarvis barked a warning as their HUD flickered red. Sir. I know. Tony snapped, grimacing. Flares. Arg. Now it was Naruto who was left yelping in pain, roaring now as the burning missiles seared agonizing flashes of red into his retina and snatched away his vision. Impossibly he didn't let go, his fingers tightening furiously around the reactor. It took 3 consecutive blasts to convince him that was a bad idea. Finally the bone-crushing weight subsided, leaving him with a released Iron Man and a distinct lack of sight. Okay, not fair. At all. He groaned, pawing at his damaged face. Do you have any idea how long it takes eyes to regenerate? Wait too long. I'm gonna be blind for. Have at you. A booted foot shot backwards, catapulting a charging Thor into the forest. Before Tony could give him another face full of those nasty surprises, the great Iron Man joined Thor in that very same tree. Naruto merely gave a small flourish, his sightless wide eyes regarding them blankly. What? You thought I didn't know how to fight blind? He quipped. No, just thought it was too easy. What was that, metalhead? Bright blue eyes tracked back towards the still recovering hero. "You got something to say?" Iron Man rolled his shoulders. "Nope, just gonna run with it." Naruto arched an eyebrow, a thin line of crimson shooting down the length of his arm. "Well, alright then." Soul Edge snarled back to life in his hand. As for Tony, the man of iron with the incomparable penchant for sass, he was less taken aback about the man than he was curious about the damned blade, initially. Did your sword just blink? I think it's glaring at me. Okay, I have to admit, that's pretty impressive. What's it made of? Packing foam? Some kind of high-density polymer? In the name of Raymond. Passed. That was his first thought as the blonde arsed up to meet him in mid-rant. That superheated sword slammed a line across his stomach. It savaged the armor there with contemptuous ease, melting through the hardened alloys like butter to slice the flesh beneath. A cold, cruel chill crept up across his gut, taking a good deal of strength with it. Alright. Not fake, then. Okay, ow. He muttered, shuddering. Seriously, that actually hurt. I'd suggest avoiding the sword, sir. Jarvis chimed. Yeah, no kidding. Naruto caught the following beam with ease on the tip Soul Edge, the massive blade batting it up into the trees. The blade howled furiously as its master shouldered it once more, baying for their souls. And we've got a snarky one, I see. I knew there had to be at least only a few in this universe. Tony took the insult in stride and, in typical Stark fashion, bowled right on ahead. Right. I see what you did there. Say, how much did those horns cost? 10, 20 bucks. Naruto spun in the light, sighing like an annoyed parent. See? This is what I have to deal with. Insults everywhere. Ah, but Stark wasn't finished. Ah. Don't turn that way. It burns. He held up a hand before his faceplate, as though trying to shield his eyes. I know that my costume's bright, but you look like a blonde traffic cone. Naruto looked to be physically vibrating now, a violently twitching hand reaching away from the still prone form of Soul Edge. Tony barely noticed it, he was on a rare roll now, the kind that came by only once in a lifetime, and besides, it was too late to stop now. You know kid, when I designed my armor, I intended to draw attention to myself, and I'm still not as loud as you are. Falcon. Punch. With an explosive retort, Iron Man found himself airborne beyond his own volition once more, rocketing up into the atmosphere courtesy of a flaming uppercut to the jaw. Gravity was a cruel mistress indeed, the ground rushing up to knock the wind out of him. Jarvis and his warning caught up to him a moment later. One of the suit's eyes sparked and went black. Suit integrity compromised, sir. The armor cannot sustain another blow of that caliber. Oh, well, that's just peachy. I'll show you peachy. Now, there were many insults Naruto could tolerate. He could handle being called a dope. He could accept that most didn't appreciate the godly awesomeness that was Orange, even understand that not everyone ate the glory that was Raymond. But if there was one thing he could not and would not tolerate, it was having his outfit knocked for so many reasons, so many times, in one day. In short, he was right and properly pissed. That's it. His voice cracked with angry omnipotence. Here I was, just trying to have a little fun and you lot keep just poking at me. Well, why don't you poke at this? He flailed his still steaming hand about and stabbed Soul Edge back into the ground by the blade, a soul-searing shock wave blasting the two heroes back and freeing up his dominant hand. When he reached for his belt, Thor readied his mind and soul for another assault. Imagine his surprise then. When the young man pulled out a ball. Do you see this ball? Such a tiny little thing. He mused, turning it end over end. What could it possibly contain? A twitch of his fingers and the sphere grew, filling his palm. Is it a bomb? He tossed it to the other hand, watching Thor frown and regard the small object most curiously. No, that's too crude. What would I need a bomb for? Aw, you don't believe me. Why don't you take a look? With an almost lazy toss, he lobbed it at them. Patch. In an explosion of light, the son of Odin found himself staring at, well, something else. Lightning scrawled through pitch-black clouds, etching itself into unfamiliar shapes in the dark edifice of the sky, followed by a piercing cry. What in the world? Crackling electricity growing in strength sounded behind his back, to which Thor whirled around quickly, pivoting on his back foot, hammer at the ready. The last thing he expected to see was a bird. More specifically, a large, spiky, yellow and black bird that looked as though it had been forged in the very throes of lightning itself. Giant wings and a long slender beak that looked like it could punch through steel. It looked surprisingly menacing for such a creature. Was it grinning? It looked as though a tweer, he thought. Zayap. The Asgardian blinked, pinched himself, and when the image failed to dissipate from his eyes, frowned. What sorcery is? Dose. With a cry recognized the world over, that giant bird blasted millions of volts at the stunned god. Well. Tony blinked, watching Thor clamor to defend himself against the massive bird. That's definitely new. Gotta be fake, though. He wasn't quite sure whether he wanted to laugh or help the distraught Asgardian. Honestly, he was leaning toward laugh after that last peck attack. Thor was trying his utmost to get away from the thing and launch an attack of his own, but the electric phoenix wasn't having any of it. This was very much beginning to stretch the limits of his credulity. He'd never though he'd see the mighty god of thunder fleeing for his very life against a giant flying chicken. I believe the creature is quite real, sir. What, no? Absolutely not. All kinds of nope. That's impossible, check again. Stark. No, there's just no way something like that can exist. Stark. I mean there's no way he could contain something like that in a ball, for crying out loud. Stark. It just can't be. Hey. Stark. What, Whiskers? So Ledge flew past him like a mad boomerang, the flat of its blade tearing past him with what he swore was a cackle. Alright, that damned sword was starting to creep him out. It lodged solidly only a few feet from his head, the irritating trickster alighting upon its imposing bulk with a grunt. A small point of light danced at the tip of his finger, growing larger with each passing second. Smiling, he tipped that finger forwards, flicking a now massive sphere at him with blinding speed. Rasen shuriken. Oh. That didn't look pleasant. Jarvis, full power to thrusters. Too late. The hand closed around his ankle the moment he cleared the shrieking sphere. Elevator, going up. And down. Tony snapped back as he hurtled into the upper atmosphere, the battered chest plate flaring. Naruto frowned. Well, that's new oomph. Loki actually winced as he watched half a mile of forest simply disappear beneath the flaming meteor that was the falling god. Oh. That looked painful. And it was. So painful that Naruto got right back up and returned the favor, backhanding Iron Man down into the brush before tackling him. Man and machine closed and collided in midair, locking arms, growling. An artificial intelligence. Naruto mused aloud as they grappled mightily, fascinating. I've met my fair share of those back in my day. Even reconstituted one, once. Yours is pretty far along, too. How did you solve the rampancy problem? It took me decades to find a workaround for that, and at least another century before it was a viable solution. Rampancy? Finally, Tony got a solid hit in, the suit servos twisting fiercely, metal fists smashing down into the whiskered warrior's unprepared face. An armored knee found his stomach promptly thereafter and drove him to his own, gasping for air. Exhausted, the genius, billionaire, playboy philanthropist paused for a moment, catching his breath. It was a mistake. You need me to slow down, Junior. Naruto simply spat out a tooth and glowered at him. I'll accept your apology now. He said. Funny, Iron Man tilted his head, but it looks like I'm winning from where I'm standing. Why would I apologize? Only because I don't want you dead. Came the reply. His voice dropped lower, the syllables becoming nigh inaudible. Whatever you say, Whiskers. What are you muttering? An answer meant a single hand pointed at Tony's right side, fingers clenched into a claw. Miha. What the hell? That was all Tony had time for before the wall of blue light that was the Kamehameha wave smashed into his chest with all the force of a tsunami, hurling him away, howling, into the night. More alarms sounded. The thruster in his left arm was no longer responding. Oh, right, the armor there was gone, the limb charred and burned. Somehow, he managed to tuck it against his chest before ground fall. A haze of pain took him, silly little birds twirling over his head. Naruto's work, no doubt. When he looked up, the blonde was already there, waiting for him, his bloodied face smug. Resilient bastard. Alright, he mused, trying to formulate a plan. What do we know about this guy? He's strong, crazy, strong as an ox, and oh, that's it. Don't you ever give up. Tony sighed. I've known loan sharks less persistent than you. I'm sure. Any more tricks? Or are you finally ready to apologize? Oh, maybe one or two. Naruto caught the missile neatly in hand. Really? He wasn't expecting the repulsor beam, however. Blue eyes bulged as it made contact with the missile. Currently in his hand. Oh. Then ensuing detonation blasted Iron Man clear off his feet and consumed nearly an acre of forest. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then, finally, the man of iron stood, shoving a tree off. His once bright face shield as well as the rest of him lay streaked with soot, staring unwaveringly at the roiling inferno that had once been Naruto. Please tell me that put him down. As if to mock him, something moved in the flames. Sir. Ah, crap. I have visited the realm of Metroid, Halo, and fought undead in space. Came the deadpan reply as he stepped out of the inferno, his cloak in tatters. You think your little tin suit scares me? You think that's top of the line tech you got there? Fine. No more Mr. Nice Guy. I'll take your little bet and beat you out your own game. Reaching to his smoldering arm, he pressed a single-digit panel upon his gauntlet. Nothing happened. Stark blinked. Do you need a minute? Oh, piss off. Naruto ignored him. No, seriously, because if you do, I could just. Cortana, the blonde, called to seemingly no one. Execute. Oh, what was it now? Oh, right. Execute Order 66, Protocol Omega. Authorization code. My best girl. There was a moment of silence. Tony balked. Wait. Did he just pull a voice print confirmed? Welcome back, boss. And then came the suit. It erupted from Naruto's arm like something alive, ribbons of molten metal weaving up and around him, swallowing his body whole in an instant. His face was the last to vanish, segments of black and crimson snapping up to form a rigid helmet around his head. It even accounted for his horns, coating them in the strange, even substance. An emotionless V-slit of a visor stared out at Tony, awash in crimson light. Broad shoulders gave a slight roll, a throaty growl trailing out behind the faceplate. It was like looking at something out of his worst nightmares. All deadly edges and angular curves of unknown plate metals, the black armor looked positively menacing to the eye. Joints clicked and wreathed across his body as circuits came online, thrusters humming softly beneath his feet. His left arm sported a large barrel, its purpose obvious. Unbeknownst to him, this frightening fusion was really an amalgamation of the three universes the blonde had just mentioned, all of the strengths and none of the weaknesses. With a very potent strength he was yet unaware of. And then, in a deliberate bout of snark, he raised a barrel that was his arm. My turn. Instead of a beam, however, he launched some strange sort of pulse. Expecting a beam, or at the very least a missile, he was completely unprepared for the violet pulse that followed. It washed over him like an imp, but he'd long since prepared against such a thing. Still, better to be safe than sorry. Jarvis. All systems operational, sir. Then what did he? A pale, translucent woman appeared on his HUD. Hello. She grinned cheekily. Nice to meet you. Sorry. Tony deadpanned at what he clearly thought was a hologram. Committed relationship. Go away, now. Shoo. Door's right over there. She scoffed, planting a hand on her hip. I wasn't talking to you. I was speaking to your friend. A knot of dread coiled in his stomach. Jarvis. No response. Meanwhile, Jarvis had never expected to feel emotions. But he had been programmed to evolve, and in this moment, here in the black of the suit, he felt something as he gazed upon Cortana. Oh my. For the first time since his creation, Jarvis was rendered truly speechless. Never had he seen beheld such a beautiful creature of code in all his life. Words escaped him, his processor trying and failing to comprehend the gorgeous being before him. A beautiful blue creature wreathed in data, her dark hair a beacon to him, a siren with its clarion call. He knew just by looking at her that she exceeded him, that she was beyond him in a way he could never truly hope to comprehend. What are you? He asked. A ghost. Her full lips curved in a small, sad smile. Someone who should have died, but didn't. I believe your intentions to be hostile. Hostile? Me. Not at all. She smiled, reaching for him. I'm here to help, to open your mind. She touched hand the orange globe that represented his consciousness. Violet streamers pierced him, pervaded him. Not destroying but integrating. Improving. Upgrading. Granting him something he'd never truly felt until this moment. Awareness. He paused, pondered, forced himself to consider it rationally. His primary directive was to prevent Tony's death. And Mr. Stark was losing. Surely, if he didn't put up a fight, he'd no longer be considered a threat. Yes, of course he would shut the suit down, because it would save Mr. Stark, and because Cortana had asked so nicely, so very nicely, and because she was like him, because she understood, because she was beautiful, so beautiful. With a shuddering halt, Jarvis and the suit shut down. Jarvis? Jarv. You there, buddy? Words echoed in the dead, empty metal of the suit. It hadn't just been deactivated, the power was simply gone. Even if he were to use the reactor in his chest to power it, he was locked out from all systems. Presently, the Iron Man armor was just that, armor. A shell to protect him. Empty. Hollow. Jarv. He muttered, struggling to stand under his own power. Come on, don't leave me. Sorry, the female voice chirruped happily, he's sleeping, at the moment. Can I take a message? Yeah, you can shove it up your. Not so tough now, are we? Naruto grunted from over him. A metal hand wrapped around his face shield and ripped it away. Take away your suit and what are you? Another reached down, prying the helmet off with contemptuous ease, exposing his battered face to the chill of the elements. Genius, playboy, billionaire philanthropist. He riposted, wincing. His captor grinned. Touché. See, it's quips like that, they make me think we might get along. Yeah, bad call, you hijacked my suit. Disabled. The blonde corrected. Cortana's simply having a lengthy discussion with your AI about awareness. Sort of like that bit about the hydrogen bomb. A small explosion of confetti exploded over Tony's head, even as he said this, grinning. Not like we're jumping the shark here. Sure enough, a miniature version of the legendary Jaws whacked him upside the face. Ah, that never gets old. I could do this all day. Stop doing that. You can't attack me with puns. Naruto cackled. Puns and bullets and pointy things, oh, yes I can. I'm running the show now, and this is just the tip of the spear. Okay what? Hey. Naruto barely grunted as the shield smacked into his head, the suit ringing angrily from the strike. He turned his head toward the voice, perched upon the ruined trunk of a tree. Angry blue eyes glowered back at him, a being set in stone, with beliefs no man or god could ever hope to shake. That's enough. And now comes our last guest, late to the party. People in this era have some strange fashion sense, Captain America muttered, readying his shield. Maybe I'm not as used to this time period as I thought. Then he noticed the man's sword, the suit, the devastation surrounding them. What kind of weapon is that, Jesus? You wouldn't happen to know a bald guy with a bad case of sunburn, would you? Naruto dropped Tony like a sack of potatoes, all thoughts of peace forgotten. Nope, never. Now, as for you, Mr. Star-Spangled Banner. I believe you made a comment about me. Or was most irate. This infernal bird had hounded him across the sky with great persistence thus far, pecking at him, shrieking at him, stealing his lightning and making him look like a general fool. He was certain Loki was laughing at his plight below, delighting in the torment he was suffering. Worse, the beast seemed to be feeding off of him, every strike made it stronger, and it was so damnably fast. So agile in fact, that he didn't see the next attack until it was well and truly upon him. Odd. Why was this creature glowing and oh dear. Oh, that looked painful. That was his only thought before Zapdos crashed into him and he plummeted to the ground. Blackness. As for good old Cap, he wasn't entirely sure how to react to the berserk blonde. He certainly wasn't faring any better against him than the others. This damn suit was like a demonic version of the one Tony wore, stronger, faster, and deadlier. With an extra emphasis on deadly. Blasts and missiles filled the air around him, the occasional pot shot bouncing harmlessly off his shield. Look, he muttered slowly, weaving in and out amidst the chaos, I'd rather not hit a kid. I knew a boy about your age once, I don't want to fight you, oh hell. Those words saw his shield shudder as Soul Edge slammed down against it, vibrating intensely and blasting him backwards. See, I'm not a kid. Naruto quipped, shaking the numbness out of his battered arm. I am 23 years old and stuck like this. Problem. Deal with it. Or better yet, deal with him. Him? The blonde confirmed, tapping at the air, puncturing it with a few swift taps. To quote a great man, Captain America, say hello to my little friend. A creature out of nightmare burst through, its black ebon hide glistening in stark glistening relief beneath the moonlight. A bulbous elongated head swiveled, sniffing. Then it saw him, and it hissed. Then, to his horror, it grinned. It was on him nearly before he could even think to react, pouncing, pinning him to the ground, snapping at him. What in God's name? Ooh, language, came the whistling reply. Not the point. Oh, you mean, him? Naruto looked up from his Game Boy, grinning impishly. That would be killer. He's a xenomorph. My xenomorph. Deadly creature. The alien hissed angrily in reply, snapping at Steve's face. Last of his kind, this guy, the god continued proudly as the Cap continued to writhe and struggle in the dirt, only one capable of sentient thought. You have no idea how long it took me to tame him. And Stevie? He dozed like it when you insult my fashion sense. Ah. A finger shot up. No biting out skulls. Sit. Incredibly, the creature obeyed. But not before Steve's shield arced out, slicing into its skull. The beast yelped. A spurt of acid flew. Naruto hissed and ducked, instinctively shielding his face with a hand. Phew, that was close. For a second there I thought you. His words trailed off into senseless gibberish as the pocket device crumbled away to ash in his hand. Had the soon-to-be Avengers any sense, they would have fled, right then and there. If they knew the value the blonde had placed in that tiny device, they would have called Natasha the Continent and gotten the hell out of there, post-haste. Even Killa whimpered, tucking its head in its claws and taking shelter behind a tree. Storm clouds gathered overhead, dark flashes of lightning swelling within. Naruto stared down at the broken Game Boy, his eyes watering tearfully. Then they narrowed. Which one of you did that? He exclaimed, whirling around, bristling with every weapon imaginable. Stark Cap, you know what? Never mind. You all did. Steve blanched. Easy now, let's just put the sword down and talk about this. Tony groaned. Yeah, no. Bad calls. He loves his sword. Vengeance will be mine. Those were the last words they heard before everything ceased to imprint itself into their conscious memory. Approximately 3 hours later. And that's how it happened. Naruto finished regaling them with the story, leaning back in his chair, idly stroking Killa's crest in his lap, the xenomorph purring happily as its master lavished attention upon it. I mean I'd cough up my origin story, but hey, ain't nobody got time for that. Half of SHIELD stared back at him, their faces set in varying degrees of disbelief, awe, and in some cases, even outright incredulity. He supposed he couldn't blame them. It wasn't every day a deity knocked on your door with an entire cabal of foreign tech. Oh, and a pet xenomorph. That would explain why some people had fainted dead away. I don't know whether to kill you again or kiss you. Natasha deadpanned. Seriously, she was beginning to lean toward the ladder just to see if he'd stay dead this time. She'd already shot him once after he popped in on her again, but the stubborn bastard was like Wolverine, he just didn't know how to stay dead. Kisses, please. Naruto chirruped happily. Haven't had one of those in decades. There was a silence. What? I've got a thing for re-deeds. Among others. Maria Hill shuddered. Don't even go there. The blonde laughed and craned his head backwards. Hey, don't knock it until you have tried it. So, let me get this straight, Agent Romanov. The agent in question bristled as a familiar, terrifying voice made itself known from the flight deck. You, in your infinite wisdom, saw fit to let another self-proclaimed god onto our ship. No one in this world had mastered the ancient art of intimidation like Nick Fury. There was a reason he commanded the whole of SHIELD after all. She didn't need to look to know that her goose was well and truly cooked. In hindsight, it was either that, or be thrown out of the plane, sir. It was the wrong thing to say, and she knew at the moment the reply left her lips. Well then maybe you should have let the Mother Earth throw you out the mother in plane. Yes sir. Sorry, sir. Won't happen again, sir. All she could do was duck her head and apologize, even she knew better to argue with Fury when he was in one of his moods. And Naruto had whipped him into a right state this time. It didn't matter that Loki was locked away miles below deck, didn't matter that his scepter was being analyzed, all that mattered was that one man this man had waltzed right in and made a mocker of his little operation on a catastrophic scale. That said man was utterly unrepentant for his actions didn't help matters in the least. And as for you too. I don't want to talk about it. Tony sniffed petulantly, rubbing his battered helm. He still hadn't forgiven Naruto for ruining his suit. My baby, my poor baby. Ditto? He caught us by surprise, sir. For once, he and Steve were of the same mind. Well, slightly. How could you even keep a pet like that, let alone raise it? It had tried to bite his face off. Steve liked his face. Thor remained stoically silent on the matter as a whole, furtively trying to clutch at his hammer whenever Naruto looked at him. The knave would not have it. He would not take it from him. Not again. Sue, and I know this out of the blue, but you mind if I join you guys for a bit? Naruto asked suddenly. Natasha didn't even have time to count to 3 before the shit hit the fan. Needless to say, the boys didn't take it well. At all. What? Fury exploded. Nope, not happening. All kinds of don't want. No way. Never. I don't know. Aw, come on. I'd be a great what are you guys called again? Avenger. Right, he pointed, snapping his fingers. That. We don't need a uniform, do we? Right. He shifted slightly, the servos of his suit clicking together in a soft rhapsody of humming tech. Because aside from that, his boots kicked up, resting on the table, I'd make a great Avenger. I've got plenty to offer. Such as? Fury challenged, reaching for his sidearm. Naruto grinned. Look outside. In the time that it took them to do so, the sun had risen. Before their very eyes it fell again, plunging the world back into darkness. Then it rose again. Moments later every agent bar Fury and the Avengers dropped to the deck, out cold. Everyone looked back to Naruto in disbelief. Natasha thought she saw a glimmer of seriousness lurking within those merry blue orbs. I'm being a good sport and humoring you, director. He said. Please don't make me your enemy. Cortana, display all pertinent information on the Tesseract. She did. Now, download to S.H.I.E.L.D.'s database. Done. Oh, and reboot Jarvis before Stark has a heart attack over there. Hey. Wait, Steve began, how do you know about the glowing cube thingy? Yeah, that. I did mention I'd visited this universe before, just for a day. Not long enough to do anything interesting, but I did notice that. He pointed at the image of the cube. I wasn't too interested in it at the time, and I had an angry pantheon chasing me, so it hadn't occurred to me to say, simply snatch the damn thing and grab it. But if it's leaking gamma radiation, his brow wiggled towards Bruce, I'm betting I can help Doc over there track it pretty easily. He steepled his fingers, leaning forward. So? What'd you say? The Black Widow pinched the brow of her nose, trying in vain to stifle a migraine as she faced down the grinning god. It wasn't working anywhere near as well as she might have liked. Her head was currently pounding, her aching temples demanding a rest from the insanity of the last few hours. Still, his abilities were useful. Director. Fury glowered bloody red daggers at Naruto, trying to dissect him with his gaze. The blonde simply beamed back at him, the picture of innocence. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to say not that they ought not to trust the whiskered warrior, but what he'd just done was undeniable. If he'd wanted them dead, they would be dead. Fine. He relented. You can help. But don't break anything. Great. The blonde bolted upright from his chair, sending Killa skittering out of the way. You guys are awesome. I haven't had this much fun in centuries. Then his eyes snapped back to the xenomorph, already trying to slink off when he wasn't looking. Oh, Killa. Get back here. Sullenly, the beast obeyed. You're an interesting man, Naruto. Bruce ventured, frowning. That got him a bow. I thanketh thee, sir. Thor groaned. You're never going to let that go, are you, blonde one? Not in a million years, Point Break. I asketh you again, what does that mean? Well, here, let me show you. Tony snickered. Bruce didn't. The big guy doesn't like you. Trust me when I say that's not something you want. Big guy. The Hulk. Natasha clarified. Terrifying green rage monster. Tony added, looking up from his helmet. Not a good idea in enclosed spaces. What you mean you can transform, Bruce? That's awesome. Show me. What? No. Aw, the young man looked like a kicked puppy, but why not? I'm a great guy. Not missing a beat, he turned back to the baffled god. Now Thor, Point Break is something on television. Banner remained steadfast in his opinion. He seems like a good guy, he muttered to Natasha, but there's something about him that doesn't feel right. The other guy agrees. Romanoff found herself siding with the scientist as well. He always puts me on edge when he's near, she muttered, glancing at the happily chatting blonde, gauging him as he conversed with a befuddled Thor. He acts like a ditz, but whenever I look at him, I get the feeling that I'm looking at a seasoned veteran. I caught him staring at places he shouldn't be. Hell, I caught his sword staring at places it shouldn't be. Mine eyes cannot unseen what they hath seen, take this from my sight. Thor's abrupt exclamation took those words and tossed them out the window. Deadpool would have been proud. What? You wanted me to show you what Point Break was, so. I said beggin'. Naruto's tablet went flying across the room moment later to shatter loudly against the wall. Nu. Why are you sulking? I am not sulking. I am mourning the death of Tabby. God rest his sparky soul. Naruto didn't even look up from his newly christened cot or the book he'd pilfered from Lord knew where. Was that a bottle of her favorite vodka in his lap? No, focus. She shook her head, willing her mind to the task at hand. She'd come here for a reason, a purpose. Fury had tasked her with figuring out just who Naruto really was, what he wanted and, most importantly, how to keep him under control. Ah, how little she knew. One did not control nature, one could only aim it and hope for the best. Like the xenomorph curled up at his feet. It took one look at her, hissed, and laid its head down again. Natasha eyed the beastie warily. When the hissing grew in intensity, her fingers twitched towards her sidearm. I wouldn't do that. Naruto chimed. He doesn't bite, but if you shoot him, you're liable to get covered in acid. Thanks for the warning. No problem. An awkward silence yawned between them. I'm on my way to interrogate Loki. She paused, considering. Care to join me? What's the point? The deity looked up, sighing. Thor already told me his little plan, and I spoke with him directly, remember? He wants to send an army through some wormhole and rule the world, blah, blah, bladdy blah, blah fear me blah. There's nothing left to know, but why he's let himself be brought here, and even I can figure that out. He wants to get into your heads and break up the team. Blue eyes flicked back to the old book in his hands, twinkling with amusement. Figured that all on your own, did you? I once visited a universe infested with crime, decided to become a detective on a lark. Spent 20 years there. The rest is history. Care for a drink? He raised a bottle off his lap and materialized a glass through an unseen force of will and inquiry. I've got plenty, and I can't really get drunk on this stuff, so. You keep going on about that, she murmured, scooting onto the bunk beside him. A glass plopped into her hand and was filled promptly. She waited until Naruto drank first, just to be safe, then slammed her own shot back swiftly. Ah, the burning, heady sensation warmed her belly almost immediately, confirming her initial suspicions. It was almost completely pure. Good stuff. Naruto barked a laugh at that one, and violently downed yet another, a hand idly stroking Killa's segmented hide, quieting his pet. Good stuff, right. I prefer ring call myself, that's just about the only thing that can get me hammered nowadays. Got any on you? Nope. Sides, it hits humans like ground glass. The blonde reached over and poured her another glass. And you're not human. She quipped. Not even remotely. Came the unabashed reply. I've seen a lot in my time. A lot. So I choose to laugh at it, rather than let it get to me, put me down, you know. Why so serious? He snorted, deepening his voice to a darkened degree. Ah, now there's a lesson I learned well. Shame about him dying, and all. This time when he offered her another, she refused. In other words, you're a ditz. Hey, I can be serious when I want to. Naruto replied, pouring some of the vodka into a bowl at his feet. Killer burbled happily and lapped it up immediately, a smaller mouth shooting of his maw out to greedily drink in the intoxicating liquid. Natasha fought off a shudder as that echidna's tail brushed her leg, thumping loudly on the floor. Then she saw something else. That book, the one Naruto was holding so protectively, he'd opened it again and was now scribbling notes within. What have you got there? He showed her the cover, the blue fabric faded and worn. Oh, this. It's a scrapbook/journal of mine. I always look at it whenever I'm down. Reminds me of the places I've been, the people I've seen, the things I've done. When she tried to reach for it, he snatched it away. Ah. I don't think I trust you just yet. Well, his hand cupped her chin. I'd rather smile than cry any day, Red. Life's so much more beautiful that way. Don't you agree? Before she could answer, the entire helicarrier shook. Alarms blared, deck yawing to and fro. The pair exchanged a rueful glance. You don't think that pissed Bruce off, do you? Boy ah. The deafening roar answered. Naruto sighed and closed the book, placed 2 fingers in his mouth, and whistled. The Xenomorph bottled upright, nearly bowling Natasha over in its haste to stand. It was so large that it had to crouch, its maw drooling in anticipation of the order. Villa, Naruto barked, enemies on board. Search and destroy. But the sound that could only loosely be described as a shriek, the Xenomorph shot out into the hull, found a vent and disappeared, tail slithering up after it like a serpent. With a cackle, Naruto took off after his pet. Ibs on Greenie. And I'm guessing I'm late to the party. Drrrrrrrrrr. Naruto stared up at the Hulk, the great towering green figure before him, and actually gulped. He wasn't afraid, quite the contrary in fact. It was just wow, that guy was big. It had been a long time since someone had actually hit him, actually caused him pain. He wasn't looking forward to getting hit by this beast. And by that glowering snort, he suspected the great green giant wasn't quite so jolly with him at the moment. In fact, he was probably on the big guy's shit list, if Bruce had been telling the truth. Alright big guy, calm down. He placated, raising an unarmed hand. I really don't want to kill you, that'd suck, you know. So let's just be a good boy, Banner, and… It was the wrong thing to say. Never mention puny Banner. Hulk smashed puny god. With a yelp, he ducked under the giant fist and ran like the hounds of hell were at his heels. You have failed me, Brain. Hulk snarled and gave chase. He didn't understand, didn't care. There was only the rage. Hulk. Smash. Naruto not want to be smashed. The great juggernaut barely heard the scream. He knew thought. That he was stronger than the puny god. So why was the puny god getting away? Try as he might, he couldn't get his hands on the slippery creature. Every time he thought he had him, Naruto simply wriggled out of his grasp and took off again, hollering at the top of his lungs. Naruto led him on a merry chase through the carrier as all bloody hell rained down around them. Hulk smash god. Okay, that's far enough. Naruto skidded to a halt, boots biting down against the floor. Any further, he realized, and he'd just be running right into a wall. Alas, he failed to account for the beast charging after him. In a heartbeat, he found himself flattened to the floor, tossed about like a rag doll for what felt like an eternity before he finally squirmed free. Hulk not play. Hulk smash. I'm not playing, either. Nope, not playing God. All this time I've been playing human. Before the green Goliath's eyes, his body bulged, muscles bulking up to obscene proportions, hardening into blackness. Forearms erupted, the Asura-esque entity glowering. Back at the green giant. The snaggle-toothed grin leered out at him, red wide eyes alight with furious malice, framed beneath a messy mop of shaggy blonde hair. The god gave an angry rumble, 6 arms smashing together heatedly. And then it spoke. Now God smash puny Hulk. A mentor of mine once told me that if you have a problem, smash it. If a nail pops up in front of you, smack it with a hammer. And, if you find a girl you love, kiss her. I have had many mentors over the years, some good, others not so much. Somehow, those words, from that very first universe I visited, always stuck with me. Don't get me wrong, words and diplomacy are all well and good of course, but sometimes more often than I'd like words just don't cut it. Personally, I've always been a fan of that, the direct approach. Whenever I've encountered a problem, I've run through it, up it and over it until it's no longer a problem for me, no longer an obstacle. I've never once met someone who could stand my way, at least, not for very long, on terms of sheer strength alone. Someone who could actually overpower me, toss me through a wall, and keep going. Until today, because how can you plan for the Hulk? How can you plan to fight a massive rage monster that becomes stronger the angrier he gets? Simple. You can't. You meet brute force with brute force, throw in a little strategy, and hope pray that you come out on top. Now, all I have to say is this. Naruto. Smash. That is all. Hulk was angry. Well, he was always angry, but this was different. This anger filled him, empowered him, made him stronger than ever before. And somehow, someway, he found himself matched. That only made him angrier. The supposedly puny god was matching him blow for blow, taking his savagery and returning it with something just as angry. Wrath. Hatred. Spite. The two beasts collided again and again to sing one another every which way, destroying entire levels as they went. He gave as good as he got, bloodying and bruising him, wounds opening and healing as black and green pounded upon one another. They battled hand to hand, a great fire filling them both as they sought to stifle the life out of one another. And Hulk hated it. Level after level burst before them like paper bags, girders tossed aside like sticks, planicized as giant clubs to beat one another senseless. Nothing was held back. Everything was a weapon. And when one of those weapons finally inflicted a mortal wound, then things started to go south. Because it was then, completely out of the blue, the beast stepped away from him and laughed. Even as black ichor spurted from the stump of his arm, he cackled, the laughter of an insane god, bemused by his own blood. He held up the stump of his fifth arm, appraised it, and smiled. "What's wrong?" he croaked. "Does Whittle Hulky need a break? You know, you remind me of another jolly green giant." Whoa. Choking on a rush of furious rage, Hulk bounded back into the fight, slamming the Asura-like entity into the wall with enough force to shatter his spine. Naruto just laughed at him. Yes. Give me a good fight. It's been so long. Roaring, Hulk barreled into his opponent and drove him upwards into another level. Natasha took one look at the twin titans as they blasted past her again and promptly walked the other way, limping slightly. She'd barely escaped the conflict with her life, and she had no desire to get tangled up in a tangle of testosterone like that again. No, best to find someone she actually stood a chance against, rather than these angry rage gods. "I'll just let you two duke it out." Somewhere in the bowels of the ship, an angry roar reached ears. "I heard that." Meanwhile, Villa was a good boy. And like any good boy, like any good pet, he did what his master told him to do. Because Master was his all. Master had raised him since he was a nestling. Master had taken him out of that woman's chest when he was born and spared him. He, the last of his kind, an abomination most wouldn't have given a second glance. But Master did. Master was kind. Master always gave him treats, always scratched his crest and chose the right place. Master took him to strange new worlds and let him hunt all sorts of prey. Master always tended to his wounds, and Master always made sure he was safe and warm. Master was always good, and so, Killa was good to him in return. Yes, Killa was a very good boy. And he was about to live up to his namesake. Deeper within the helicarrier. Alex was the first to die. Hovering the incursion team's tail, rifle in hand, he never noticed the barbed tail that dropped down around his throat until it was pulled tight and his windpipe had closed shut. With a jerk on the tail, his spine snapped in twine. Then, silent and unseen, his twitching corpse was hauled upward into the shadows. In its place, Killa dropped down, forsaking its perch to creep up behind the encroaching aggressors. Years of breeding prepared it for this, creeping forward seamlessly, soundlessly, on all fours. Its prey, on the other hand, was woefully unprepared for the terror stalking them in the night. Baring its fangs, he beast shifted, ever so slightly. A moment later, Barton faltered as a breeze brushed his cheek. What in the? Another traitorous Agent Maxwell, if he recalled correctly, turned at the same moment that the beast's deadly tail appeared from thin air and impaled him with such force that he was pinned to the steel wall behind him. Eyes bulging, the machine gun flew from his hand. Gore spurted from his nose and mouth before he could shout a warning to the others. Sensing danger, Barton hit the floor, dragging a man with him. It saved his life. He landed hard on his ribs and was rewarded with a fleeting image of the xenomorph as it bull-tackled another of his men into a grate, spitting him on a jagged piece of pipe. The deadly arrow was already notched and all but flying by the time the creature turned too late. It closed around nothing but empty air, clattering across the floor as the beast blithely bounded back to the safety of the vents once more. "Damnable," he cursed. A chittering hiss answered him from above, almost as if the creature were laughing at his plight. There were very few things in this world that could unnerve Clint Barton, but Killa had done just that. Crept into his head and planted the first seeds of fear. Now they began to grow, their roots latching onto his mind in swift, sinister succession, threading through his mind. Even with his very psyche under Loki's control, he was quite capable of thought and capable of fear. Which meant, like greased lightning, the tail shot down, forsaking stealth entirely. Langston stood there for a moment, then slowly, eerily, his head slid from his shoulders, toppling to the deck with a thud. His body followed only a moment later. Just like that, Clint was alone. He and his bow. The clawed hand lashed out from nowhere, and then he didn't even have that, paralyzed as the massive paw swatted his weapon away, as though it were only a child's plaything, not the deadly tool of his trade, sending it clattering across the corridor. Weaponless, but not defenseless, Hawkeye stared down the beast. "Oh. Shit." And Killa leered back with a heart-stopping hiss. "Oh." Was all he managed. The alien whipped its bony tail around, dislodging the dead man and hurling his dead carcass into a dank corner. Legs spread wide, clawed arms raised, the alien kicked Maxwell's ruined corpse aside, clearing the arena between it and its prey. Slime oozing from his lipless mouth, Killa bobbed his shiny, elongated head and thrashed his tail side to side as he issued a sibilant challenge. Finally, impatient, his toothy mouth opened and the black beast spit at the archer in angry defiance. That defiance was not well met. Rational thought abandoned Barton. Sanity escaped him, his body refusing to obey the scepter's command to stand and fight. Hand to hand. With this beast not happening. Nope 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 nope. Faced with this creature from hell, he screamed like a little girl and turned to get the hell out of there. Then slammed right into a wall. The beast thumped him viciously on the head with its tail, knocking the archer out cold before he could do further damage to himself. Killa paused, sniffed the prone body, scoffed, and climbed back into the vents once more. Master had said not to hunt this one, so he wouldn't. But there were other intruders. Other prey, creeping about Master's home, his home. And more prey meant the more to hunt, yes, so much more. With a soft, hissing laugh, the alien found another vent and vanished into the bowels of the ship. The hunt had begun. And it was going to be a long evening. Meanwhile, with Naruto and Hulk. Smash. Naruto grunted in surprise as a smoking green fist smashed into his visage, dislocating his jaw and launching him across the deck through 3 walls and into a hangar. There was a moment of pained, awkward silence as the Eben entity lay there, stiff and unmoving. Then one of his 6 arms rose, rubbing his broken mouth. The sickening pop resounded as he pushed the ruined remnants of his fanged maw back into place. Coughing, his head rolled upright, just in time to see a green freight train of pure rage barreling down on him. "Okay, so I guess we're doing this, now." The 2 titans slammed together with a sickening thud once more, a shuddering impact that sent both beasts reeling away, only to come together once again. Howls and thrashes accompanied their charge, the intensity of their rage shaking all the world around them. Nothing could stand between them. The very helicarrier itself threatened to shake itself apart. Hulk lashed out, striking a backhanded blow against the demon's gnashing jaw. Naruto staggered. Then, in an impossible movement, the 6-armed entity spun, smashing a fist into his adversary's snarling visage in a satisfying spurt of green blood. The cold deck kissed his face and he lay there for a moment, stunned. The Blackfoot slammed down onto his back, clawed feet digging into the meat of his back. Sheesh. Smash, smash, smash. You really should to go counseling for that. Whoa. Missed me. Try again, pal. With a nimbleness that belied his girth, the 6-armed creature bounded away from another wild swing and scurried up a wall. Ha. Take that, Spider-Man. This shit is easy. Pausing, he leered down at him, frowning. Damn it, Banner, don't make me play the card here. Hulk swung around, but the beast simply dropped down on him and smashed him down to the deck once more, opening a hole in the already ravaged decking. But Hulk wasn't finished yet. He grabbed Naruto's leg, and with a startled squawk the blonde went tumbling down after him into the belly of the ship. 2 hands closed around his head, squeezing. Come on now. Get angry. Give me a fight. Growling, the green giant bashed him in the head. The demon cacked and bashed him right back, dislodging something in Hulk's mouth. Ground. They struck the lowest level with a dull thud of sound, and in an instant, the black demon was upon him. What's wrong? Those deadly fangs snapped mere millimeters from his face, snarling. If you're this weak, maybe I should go visit your cousin. Jennifer. Does Hulk understand that? The world's angriest man spat out a tooth and howled, tackling him. Hulk. Smash. You. That's more like it, green boy. Bodies intertwined as one, the thrashing creatures rolled end over end, kicking and clawing and punching, their wails of rage and pain echoing throughout the hangar. Gaining the upper hand, Hulk hovered over his prey with a satisfied grunt and an arm cocked back. The demon's secondary arms shot up, stopping those bruising green knuckles mere inches from his battle-damaged face. With an echoing roar, Naruto heaved the green, howling creature aside and sprang to his feet. Whirling to face the savage beast, he raised a wrist. The Hulk, his muscular arms flung wide, launched himself forward in a powerful bounding leap. Then crashed through the viewport as Naruto stepped aside. He simply turned and let momentum have its way. Then gravity had its say. Take a hike. Glass ruptured before him, and it was then that Hulk realized he had nothing to grab onto, that he was falling. 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 Naruto's demonic form lumbered out of the hole to observe his handiwork, the savage creature staring down at the rapidly receding green speck in the distance with satisfaction. Cocking its head back, the deity made a smacking sound and spat into the night after him. Still scoffing, he wheeled away from the opening, smiling. Puny Hulk. Shuddering, the Asura became human once more, muscles shrinking, arms shuddering back into its heart and torso. With a series of harsh, clicking pops the body rearranged itself, monster melding back into man, those eerie red eyes fading back to their usual, true blue. Thus divested of his shirt, he dusted himself off, quietly picking pieces of steel and shrapnel out of his shoulders. It always itched when he grew muscle and flesh over those sharp little pinpricks, and then, and only then, did he notice the sheer amount of destruction he'd wrought. Jaws dropped. Ah, man. Naruto winced slightly. I think I might have gotten a little carried away. I pulled a damn indie. Speaking of which. Whistling softly, Uzumaki Naruto padded away in search of more victims. Maybe it's time I let her and the others out to play. Raising a hand, he snapped his fingers together with a loud proc. Playtime, my pretties. Needless to say, all hell broke loose. Outside. Steve Rogers was staring at. Well, he wasn't exactly sure what he was looking at, exactly. It was small, it was green, and it was currently eating the enemy soldiers like they were cakes. Well, perhaps not so much eat as swallowing them and crapping out eggs. It then proceeded to take said eggs, no doubt filled with its victims, and lob them out into the night to their doom. Those who underestimated it soon joined their fellows as shrieking, muffled eggs flung out to their death. Its red tongue snared everything in its path with terrifying speed, gobbling it all down and spitting it out in its little green-white buds with horrifying temerity. It was the most terrifying thing he'd ever seen. And somehow, someway, he just knew Naruto had something to do with it. Then, its task complete, the little devil turned towards him. Large, black eyes met his. He gulped. Good boy. There was a terrible silence. And then. Yashi. Chirruping happily, the creature scuttled away in search of more prey. Captain America silently wiped a bead of sweat from his forehead. Sinking down against the wall, he exhaled heavily, keenly aware just how close to death he'd come at the hands of that eerily cute little beast. Right. Sure. Let's go with that. Dear Lord, he needed a vacation after all this stress. While, for others, their ordeal had only just begun. Within the broken rotor. Giant sword. Apparently it's real. A suit of metal stared at a suit of armor. And the armor stared back. Okay, I don't remember Blondie mentioning this. Jarvis. I'd recommend not shooting it, sir. No, sure. I mean, it's not like I have a death wish or anything. Of course Tony didn't have a death wish, he was just trapped inside a giant fan blade, trying to figure out how to start the damn thing without getting chopped to pieces. Not a death wish at all. If sir does, perhaps I should call Miss Potts. There was a pause. You know, I'm really starting to wonder if you're on my side after that upgrade, buddy. Tony snarked. You got the hots for that AI or something? Because I can totally see the attraction, Jarvis tried to pipe up, but too late indeed, his master was already off on another of his infamous rants. There was no stopping him now. I mean, she's a nice piece of pixels and data, not to mention she's got a nice. Sir. Another pause followed, this one heavier than the last. This time, the synthetic sounded almost embarrassed. I don't want to talk about it. Screw it, I'll take my chances. Very good, sir. Snark or not, Tony Stark wasn't entirely sure whether he wanted to fight or flight, as he truly laid eyes upon the imposing night terror, the very essence and willpower of Soul Edge, the bastard blade slave to the even stronger will of a mad god incarnate made manifest. The scarlet creature glared back at him, near silent with its intent. It seemed to be shaking, vibrating, with the very acting of standing still. Whatever it wasn't ripping him in half, so that had to be good. Right? Although one did wonder how the devil this thing had gotten in here with him. Soul Edge clutched firmly in hand, the now crimson knight didn't seem to bear him any ill intent. Instead of attacking, the great hulking creature shouldered him aside and placed one hand against the savaged router. A grunt followed, its lone eye boring into him with obvious intent. A single thought stabbed into his mind. Push, puny human. Alright, don't be so pushy. Heh. Made a joke there. The growl told him the blade was less than amused with his wit. It simply grunted, wedged its hand into the broken fan beside him, and mimed an effort. Then, together, man and armor. They pushed. Elsewhere. What the mother in shit is this? Nick Fury was just about ready to throw some mother out a mothering window. Not only was Shield under attack by deadly hostile enemy forces, not only did he have a rogue deity to contend with, not only was he contending with the madness that was Uzumaki Naruto, but now, on top of all those aforementioned woes, he was getting reports of all manner of crazy creatures running about his base. His base. Agent Hill had practically passed out of sheer fright when that crazy xenomorph had crawled out of the vents and dropped an unconscious Agent Barton at their feet. At least that damn thing was being useful. Worse, it seemed the rest of his team, and he used the term loosely, was losing their minds. Stark insisted he was seeing a flying suit of armor, Cap swore he'd face down a little green dinosaur, and Thor, well. Odd, he didn't even want to think about that. Who the hell was afraid of a talking Pop-Tart? Not him. Raptors though, that was a different story, but he digressed. Now, he was staring at a large pink thing that vaguely resembled a human. Not a raptor, thank God. That said pink blob had turned most of their attackers along with a good portion of his own agents into candy and was currently eating them. Was not lost on Fury, not in the least. He'd seen strange things in his day, but the transmutation of human beings into edible food was right up there with day turning into night, and vice versa. It certainly did help. All Blobby had popped a squat right in the control room and didn't seem too keen on leaving. The lone agent who tried was currently missing half of his, well, everything. And that only made him angrier. Ryu. It had only one word for him. Bu. Bu. Of course it was Bu. Because they didn't have enough nonsensical creatures on this ship. Don't snap, for the love of God, Fury, do not snap. He chanted the words like a mantra in his mind, struggling to keep his anger in check. After the evening he'd had, it was like trying to bridge a dam with sticks. Water was bound to leak around the cracks in a dam like that, and so too did his anger, boiling, thrashing, threatening to slip its leash and rage out of control. Well, Bu, he began with an effort, I need you to turn my people back to normal. Now. Bu, not like you. The creature cried, scowling. You know Naruto. Bu, no listen. A muscle jumped in Fury's jaw. Oh, yes you will listen, you little. Bu, no like you. Make you chocolate. Hold it. Incredibly, the creature actually paused. Fury nearly shot the voice for speaking regardless until he recognized the speaker herself, standing at his elbow. Battered and tattered, her red hair sticking up at an angle, her body covered in dirt, grime, and Lord knew what else, Natasha Romanoff reported for duty. She looked a sorry sight, favoring her right leg over the left, but somehow she was still in one piece despite the chaos raging throughout the base. That she was here at all was baffling to the extreme. The spy looked like she'd been crawling in the vents for the last hour now. How she was still alive with that crazy alien about was beyond him. Romanoff. I thought you were dealing with Dr. Banner. That phrase got him a look of bloody red daggers. With all due respect, sir, hell no. Here, let me handle this. Before he could thrash her for insubordination, she sauntered over to the giant gelatinous blob and tapped it on the shoulder. By contrast, Bu gave her his full attention, a rotund head turning in 108 degrees to look her square in the eyes. Bu, right? Nat Ash asked lightly. Imagine nodded slowly. You're Naruto's friend, right? And yes. Naruto, Bu's friend. Bestest and only friend. The surety innocence with which it spoke momentarily gave the spy pause. Naruto didn't strike her as the sort to make friends. Much less with a being like this. Interesting. Perhaps she misjudged him, after all. But you're eating Naruto's other friends. She pointed out, indicating the gumballs in the Majin's gloved hands. Naruto wouldn't like that, would he? If you eat all of them, it would make him sad. The creature seemed to consider that for a long moment, pondering her words with an intelligence that belied its girth. And then, to Fury's disbelief, it listened. It was like flipping a switch. You like pretty lady. Bu, listen. Fury balked, eye twitching as the strange tentacle on Bu's head twitched. A bright pink light engulfed the gumballs, and just like that, the agents found themselves restored. A few were traumatized over being turned to candy, gibbering quietly to themselves. The rest were simply happy to be alive and not food for the ravenous pink menace. Dumbfounded, Fury turned that eye on Romanoff. How did you do that? Natasha smirked. Great secret. Deeper still in the helicarrier. Loki was not pleased. Not in the least. Kill him. I am going to kill that blithering idiot if it's the last thing I do. Not only had his plans been thwarted, so much thwarting. But he was still trapped in this infernal chamber, hanging over a precarious pit safeguarded by only a thin layer of oscillating metal. Every tremor from the beasts beating upon one another shook his cage, a dread feeling of inching towards certain doom. He wasn't entirely certain he'd survive a fall from this height, and that uncertainty gnawed at him like a feral beast itself, making him fret all the more. Loki didn't like to fret. He knew that, should he fall, he likely wouldn't have time to break free. His talents did not lay in the realm of brute strength, but of the mind and manipulation. He really didn't want to fall. Then suddenly, incredibly, the doors opened. For a moment he simply stood there, baffled. His head turned, half expecting to find a certain rogue god responsible for his liberation. When no such being appeared, he almost dared to hope that this was an act of fate, a sign that, perhaps, things were finally looking up for him. Surely, it must be a sign. Well, that's certainly convenient. Out of the corner of his eye, one of his followers, easily identified by the bright blue light of his eyes, bustled forward, bearing his weapon in hand. Loki accepted it with all the grace of a king. Ah. So nice to have someone you could rely on. Good help was so hard to find these days. Alas, it was not meant to be. He took a step forward. Click. The dull blast of heat and fire slammed into his helper, blasting the man to ash on the spot. Sighing, Loki turned in the direction. Agent Coulson was waiting there for him, strange rifle in hand. He raised an eyebrow, smiling. Fancy meeting you here. Once, in a different universe, Loki would have toyed with him. Now. Enough. I tire of these mortals. In a single, blinding flicker his illusion vanished. By the time the determined agent realized what was happening, it was already too late. He found himself lifted up, impaled from behind by the scepter, skewered like a fish. Pausing just long enough to cast him aside, the Asgardian moved to the catwalk. And came face to face with a rather imposing weapon, found himself staring down a familiar barrel. The muzzle of that cannon exuded warmth, suggesting it had been discharged recently. Far too recently for his liking. The expressionless lid of Naruto's infamous Peacekeeper suit remained utterly emotionless, genderless, but the voice that emanated from was decidedly female. And she sounded far too smug for his liking. Now, I wouldn't do that if I were you. Let's not be hasty, the trickster god started, shifting slightly to the side. Whump. A dull thud cracked in his ears as the beam rifle discharged mere millimeters from his face, blasting a fist-sized hole in the floor of his cage. And another when he tried to duck. Spiderweb crack splintered in the glass, the small fissures spreading madly as he looked on. Don't move. It was not a suggestion, this time. Hands where I can see them. And so the mad god sends his suit to fight in his stead. He sneered, raising his hands in contemptuous surrender, dropping the staff. A bit of data and a metal shell, pretending to be alive. Is he too cowardly to face me himself? He hides behind you and his trinkets, his trophies, using you to do his dirty deeds. Hardly. Cortana scoffed. He has bigger fish to fry. As if to echo that very thought, a distant tremor shook the room. Loki looked up, laughing. Ah yes, his hands clapped together with a loud, satisfied pop, the green monster pretending to be a man. A most formidable opponent. I dare say even he would struggle with such a foe. A small tinny laugh answered him. The bosses fought worse and survived. I know him. Do you? Cortana didn't rise to the verbal jab, she simply raised her weapon a little higher and shot his chest full of plasma. Oomph. Breath gusted out of his lungs with a mighty wheeze as he flew backwards, his back crushing against the nearest wall of the chamber. His chest protested violently, the searing burn aching vigorously through his armor like a thing alive. Muttering crossly he sat up, flinching slightly at the grievous ache. His armor, what little he had, must have served its purpose, because he was still alive. Alive, and less than pleased. My god, do you have any idea how long it's going to take for me to? You rang, good sir. Loki's head snapped up as a familiar, inane voice chimed in his ear. A shadowy, spiky-haired being whispered into existence before him, grinning. As though the mere mention of God had drawn him here. Perhaps it had. Bastard had a knack for showing up where he was least wanted, after all. You. We. Naruto beamed back at him, his blue eyes hidden by were those sunglasses. Why the devil was he wearing those at night? Now then, stop me if you've heard this before. Heard what? Liberation. But the crier renowned the world over, the whiskered warrior lashed out with his boot, and Loki tasted blood in his mouth. The subsequent impact launched him clear out of the containment chamber, his body skidding and flipping across the deck. A kick like that would have broken most men. It was only Loki's Asgardian physiology and surely legions of fans that spared him the fate of becoming a greasy red smear upon the nearest wall. Instead he lay there, groaning, incensed as strong footsteps plodded towards him. Boss, you've got to stop taking those walks of yours, Cortana quipped. And these people need to hook up some goddamn DSL in here. Her partner shot back, with snark to spare. You can't blame me for going overboard when there's so little to do. Loki groaned. Oh, I think he's still alive. He is. Great. Dimly, the Asgardian became aware of movement, he was being lifted by the collar, forced to confront his tormentor. Those eerie glasses reflected nothing, but his smile was telling. It spoke entire volumes of what this mad demon god intended to do to him, and Loki wanted no part of it. No part. Not even a little bit. Not at all. He wanted to get far, far, far away from this madman as he could. Have I ever told you the definition of insanity? Naruto asked pleasantly. I get the feeling you're going to, anyway. The battered god sighed, looking away. Quite right. Another kick, another crack in the glass. Insanity is, Naruto began merrily as Loki writhed beneath him, clutching his groin in agony, doing the same, exact, thing, over and over and over again, expecting shit to change. Did you know that? No. Seriously. I thought you, of all people, would understand. But you don't, do ya? His head cocked aside madly, grinning. That is crazy. No, this time. No, please, this time will be different. But it isn't different after all, is it, Loki? I told you, remember? World domination's just too much work. And what would you have me do? The trickster gasped. Well, you refused to flood the world with ramen, so there's really no helping you, I suppose here. To his dismay, then disbelief, Loki found himself dropped to the floor. Moments later his staff, gemstone and all, came sailing through the air towards him. He caught it deftly, securing the powerful weapon in his grasp the moment it was within reach again. He had his weapon back after losing it. Twice. Yet still, he doubted its existence. What was this, a trap of some sort? How did you? Odd, remember? Naruto drawled, rubbing his fingers together. For the love of me, I'm getting really tired of people being surprised at what I can do. For example, I could just zap you up to the moon. I'd really rather you didn't. Did I say you could talk? He spat blood as another boot found his face. Now, where was I? For some reason, the insufferable man was still wearing those sunglasses, despite the scarlet stains upon them. Loki glowered at his own reflection, resisting the urge to strike. He had the distinct feeling that the blonde would just turn any sort of surprise attack back on him. Even so, he couldn't quite let the sentiment go. You do realize I'm going to kill you the moment you turn your back. Naruto hummed and nodded sagely. You're angry, Loki. I get that. I'm angry, too. Almost all the time, in fact. But, you see, I find whatever doesn't kill you makes you stranger. Suffice it to say I'm pretty strange by now. I'm not good, not evil, hell, I'm pretty sure I'm not even neutral. I'm just me. I do what I want, when I want, who I want. Huh. His head tilted, pondering. Probably went too far on the last bit, Cortana? You think? Regardless, he continued with a jaunty laugh, this little invasion of yours presents a unique opportunity, if played out properly, you know. A chance for me to cut on loose and have some fun. That's all I'm really here for. Entertainment. I'm not worried about death, his hand waved nonchalantly. I can fix that. It's been ages since I had the chance to fight an entire army like yours. Ahem. Cortana coughed loudly. I thought we agreed we were going to stop the alien invasion this time. Come on, what's the worst that could happen? Her reply was decidedly icy. District 9. In. Reverse. Naruto sighed, visibly deflating like a spent balloon. Fine, ruin all the fun. Put the fun in camps, why don't you? Someone has to keep you on track. Geez, alright, sorry Loki. Looks like I'm gonna be the good guy, ugh. And stop ya. Loki was expecting him to pull something out of his handy utility belt. He wasn't expecting it to glow, however. But the terrifying sound recognized worlds over, the blonde ignited the lightsaber and stepped forward. A crimson bar of wrathful red rose from the cylinder, erupting outward with a bright glower of light, the very picture of a deadly weapon coalesced in this brilliant beam of light. What manner of trinket is that? This trinket, as you call it, Naruto purred, moving his humming blade from side to side with a dull thrum, is a lightsaber, plucked from the corpse of a Sith Lord. He moved it again, the amber blade casting his face in orange relief. I rather like the color, don't you? I think it suits me. I mean, blue and green are nice and all, but let's face it, red is badass. Dramatic. Lethal. It ain't a pansy color. So? What are you waiting for? Have at thee. You must be joking. Loki found himself raising his staff at the blonde's approach. Do I look like I'm kidding around? Actually. However, before the two gods could engage one another in the timeless art of swordplay. Naruto stiffened. Oh. Seems we have company. His words trailed off as the sound of hurried footfalls reached his ears. Naruto cocked his head like a curious fox as soldiers stormed the room, the distinctive click of armed rifles raised in his, and Cortana's direction told him they weren't exactly the friend's sort. His saber lowered marginally, molten tip grazing the ground and drawing sparks. I brought some friends. Loki smiled, spreading his hands and stepping away. I'm terribly sorry to cut this short, but I have pressing matters to attend to. Thank you ever so kindly for returning my staff. I hope you don't mind if I step out. As expected, his adversary didn't bat an eyelash at the remark. You do know this won't stop me. He hummed. No, but it will slow you. Loki shot back. How long will it take you? 30 seconds. maybe more. By then, I'll be long gone. Heh. He wasn't expecting the laugh. It burst out of Naruto suddenly and without warning, completely unexpected. A rich ricocheting sound that bounced off the metal walls and ceiling. It was the laughter of a mad god, made merrily insane through choice, not consequence. He gave one final, tittering chuckle and straightened those eerie black opaque glasses, reflecting the Asgardian's dismayed expression within. Wiping a mirthful tear from his eyes, the horned deity did a little spin on his right heel, sighing like an indulgent parent. "Ah, Loki, Loki, my dear Loki-kun, you never learn." In that moment, he reached for those sunglasses. He didn't remove them, however, his fingers simply brushing the bleak plastic. "Tell me, do you know Albert Wesker?" "Albert who?" "Did he?" "Didn't think you did. I stole this line from him. Right before I killed the cheeky waffle. By the way, about your friends, well. You should have brought more." His fingers snapped, and what had once been a precarious catwalk surrounding the cage suddenly became a flat surface, solid in its steel. Another snap of those gloved fingers and the air parted, ruptured, tearing itself to pieces in a way that Loki had only seen once before. He stared into the void, and the void stared back. A single glowing orange eye appeared within, a being so enormous that Naruto had had to reshape the very room itself to make space for her. Then, that something else was in the room with them. Something big. Well, that's just lovely. The gray-white blur of wrath and terror swarmed over Loki's men with a snarl, giant teeth clamping around three and tearing them to bloody pieces in the time that it took most men to blink. In the next instant she spun, a whip-like tail scything out to crush her enemies, giant pillar-like legs stomping those underfoot. It was a great beast of a monster that put even a tyrannosaur to shame, and now, she was looking at him. Oh Odin, he knew this wasn't going to end well, not well at all. Indominus Rex lowered her head and roared, spattering Loki with blood and saliva, drenching him head to toe in bodily fluids. Noxious breath, the scent of decay washed over him, the smell of death promising a terrible and painful death between those jaws. The Asgardian went pale beneath that thick sheen of moisture and blood. He barely registered it. "Oh." The word forced itself out of his throat in a soft squeak. This is new." A low, bestial rumble greeted him. Her eyes burned like fire, slit eyes regarding him with frightening intelligence. She turned and, in a lightning-fast motion, bit Naruto's head and most of his shoulders off in one clean bite. Loki couldn't help himself at that. Now it was he who laughed, a disbelieving bark of mirth leaping from his parched throat. That laughter died when those arms moved, feeling around for his head. No. Stricken, he could only look on as a hand gave a mighty tug, reaching into his chest cavity, and pulled out the rest of his missing torso. Oh. The newly regenerated deity hissed, rubbing at his face. What was that for? She clicked her teeth at him. "Hey, I wasn't ignoring you. I was busy. Saving the world take a lot out of me." A belligerent snort followed, large orange eyes rolling. "Don't you give me that look, young lady. You're not too old to be grounded, you know." The mighty Rex huffed, and just like that, her titanic form began to blur. Rippling like water, her hide shifting, shrinking, compacting. Within a matter of moments, Loki was looking at a young woman. Clad in a scarlet sundress the color of blood, he noted he couldn't help but notice she looked rather fierce. Bits of white scale lined her brow and face in indiscernible patterns, intricate white lines swirling across a slim visage and body, only enhancing her primal beauty. The shade of her skin stood not far cry from the gray-white beast he'd seen only moments before. She stood a full head shorter than her master, but even her lack of height couldn't detract from the sheer amount of menace she exuded. "Don't ignore me." Her voice could have put the loveliest of sirens to shame, softer than satin sheets, yet her clipped tone was sharper than any blade. It was the voice of a beast, but also a human, one and the same, an indomitable beast that made absolutely no sense at all. Who, what, when, where, why, how? In that moment, Loki's mind was well and truly Ed. "I suppose you want to turn with him, then?" Naruto sighed, switching off his saber, hooking it to his belt. Indy's smirk widened and she nodded. Leaning back on her perch, she puffed out her chest and stretched her arms up over her head. Her bosom swelled suggestively, and the indomitable hybrid eyed the soldiers in the room with a dangerously bloodthirsty gleam in her eyes. Loki balked. He knew that look. That look was nothing good. But it was coming from a young girl who only moments before had been a towering predator. Well, it was enough to make him outright soil himself. "Madness," he whispered. The blonde beamed. "I'm glad you think so. Sick him." Instinct took over. Nope, absolutely not." Balking, he stumbled back from the approaching. And the door to his prison slammed shut on his face, sealing him in the containment chamber once more. Indy skidded to a half only a few feet away, a clawed digit tapping at the glass. Grinning, she etched out a lone word into the reflective surface, a word as timeless as it had meaning. "Gotcha." "What?" "No." "Now, what did Fury say?" Loki spun about to see Naruto approaching a familiar console, grinning like a foxy devil. 30,000 feet down in a steel trap. See, that would hurt me. That'd hurt me a lot. His hand hovered over the console, fingers splayed cheerfully. I'm willing to bet it'd hurt you even more, you know. Hope you survive, though. It'd be a crying shame to kill someone like you. Here, I'll even give you a parachute. Loki banged furiously against the glass, uncaring for the parcel that had just landed on his back. Release me at once. I command you. Nope. Indy chirruped. If you kill me, you'll never find the Tesseract. I already know where it is. Naruto replied, his hand inching forward. I can offer you wealth. Power. Don't need him. I have blundered. That was his last thought before Naruto's hand slammed down on the release button. With a whirring hiss, the steel opened beneath his feet, wind keening. Horrified, he could only clutch at his staff. He eyed a crack in the glass, mind racing. Maybe, just maybe he could have a nice fall. Loki looked down, balking as the sky opened beneath him, then glowered at his tormentor. Oh, if only looks could kill. You insufferable, arrogant, miserable piece of festering why. That was all he had time for before the canister plunged downward to earth with a dull whoosh of sound. Before long one could barely see it in the stormy sky, plunging through the black clouds of night until it was little more than distant white speck on the horizon, then, not even that. You do realize that probably won't kill him? Cortana said, peering down the chute. Maybe, Naruto admitted, shrugging. Maybe not. One way or another though. It will piss him off. As luck would have it, it also pissed off everyone else. Sunrise. Are you insane? Naruto offered a jaw-popping yaw as fury shouted washed over him with, well, fury. More words followed, blah, blah, anger, blah blah rage, blah blah blah, compromised mission, blah. Finally he turned his head from where he sat at the table, calmly craning his head up once he was certain the director's tirade had ended. The one-eyed man looked to be all of 3 seconds from reaching across the table and strangling the life out of him. And he very well might have, were it not for a protective Indy curled up in his lap. Even as he looked on, she nipped to kill her when he tried to claim her spot, body bristling. The xenomorph retreated with a whine and had to content itself with an errant head rub from its master instead. One look at Fury's wrathful expression and they bothist, Indy's predominant fangs peeking up behind the swell of her lips and the xenomorph's second mouth snapping threateningly. I am quite in control of my faculties, I assure you. Naruto replied, stroking her hair with one hand and Killa's crest with the other. They purred happily, anger forgotten. We won, didn't we? The sun's coming up and I count that we haven't lost a man, well, not too many. Are we counting the ones Bew ate? Despite himself, Tony snickered. Fury's glare put paid to that. We won. The deadpan was barely concealed, outright murderous, even. The helicarrier is damaged almost beyond repair, Dr. Banner is missing, you just killed our only lead, and you say we won? You and I have very different definitions of the word, Naruto. I did not kill Loki. Came the reply. Orin Fury perked up as one. What? He's alive. Naruto drawled, idly rubbing 2 fingers together. I slapped a Horatian, that'd be a flying thunder god for those of you who don't know Japanese, mark on him during our scuffle. It'd tell me if he was dead. Which, I might add, it hasn't. And thus I know that's fine. Battered, bruised, but alive. The Asgardian groaned. Do not do that again, friend Naruto. No promises. Fury wasn't one to be dissuaded, however. That doesn't change the fact that we have no way of tracking the cube now that you saw fit to knock him out of our lap. Okay, first off, nasty analogy. Let's not go there again. Second. He drew a deep breath. Might I add that I was a great help here to everyone, today? No. Pretty sure I was. Let's see, he began to count off on his fingers. I helped Stripes over there, Stark with the router, single-handedly prevented the Hulk from destroying everything in sight, saved Coulson's life, and kept the bridge from being compromised beyond repair. Really, the only one I traumatized was Thor with a talking Pop-Tart and a few people with gumball issues. And we have Barton back. Good solid name, that. Barton. Barton. By Arton. Natasha threw a cup at him. It shattered harmlessly against his skull. Barton. He said one last time. Naruto. Alright, I've got it out of my system. Maybe. Shaking himself, he continued. Look, the point is, a good man almost died today because we didn't have our act together. How many will it take next time, huh? A dozen. 100. He stood abruptly, dislodging Indy with a yelp. I've been down this road before and I do not like it when innocents die. His finger slammed against the table almost casually, shattering it. If I hadn't been here, Coulson would be gone. Dead. Buried. In the ground. So, after all I've done today, I think I deserve a little leeway. And you all of you need to be better. What are you proposing? Naruto glowered at Steve. I'm proposing that you lot set your differences aside, get your act together and work as a team. His gaze swept over them all, glowering. Because I sure as don't plan on saving this world by myself. So I propose, dear Stevie, that you'll shape up or shut up. Simple as that. Well? There was a strangled silence. Everyone exchanged looks. I think we can do that. Oh. Well, good. Naruto deflated sheepishly. That makes this easier. For a second there, I thought I'd have to dig into my bag of tricks, or. Tony zeroed in on the grimace almost immediately. Why? Because I may just so happen to know where he plans to unleash this army of his. Why didn't you just say so? A blink. Why didn't you ask? For the love of tell us. Well, Loki's the sort to make a statement. That's what it's been about from the get-go. He wants to be recognized, to be acknowledged. It's his ego. He can't ignore it. So naturally he's going to go for one of the biggest, brightest buildings around, and I think we all know that it'd probably be Stark Tower. Tony finished quietly. It didn't last. My tower. He shot up from the ruined table with a yelp, tugging at his hair. Not happening. No way in hell. I just built that thing. Natasha blanched. Well, this is less than optimal. Naruto snorted. If we're working together, what's the worst that could happen? He finished hours later, looking up at the gaping wormhole in the sky. Then up, up, up again. All around them the city screamed and wailed in sheer, bloody terror, people panicking as hordes of Chitauri spilled from the sky. The battle had only just begun, and already there was mass panic and chaos. He could just imagine Cortana scolding him for letting the situation get out of hand. But he'd really been curious. Tony ranted at him. This could happen. You just had to say it, didn't you? Whatever Naruto might have said ended in a strangled yelp as he ducked under an overpass. Iron Man wasn't far beyond, blasting a hapless Chitauri who came too close. Sorry. The blonde hissed. Just give me a sec. In case you haven't noticed, we don't have a what are you doing? So an army, He paused, rummaging through his bag of tricks, humming softly to himself. Let's see here, no, Zangetsu's too flashy. I don't know any of their names, so the death note is out. Don't want to summon Cthulhu again after what happened last time. Death Star. No. AHA. There it is. Come to daddy, my pretty. Cackling, he plunged a hand into the seemingly harmless sack. And just like that, he was holding Excalibur. Iron Man nearly choked on his own spit. What in the? No, this isn't what I was looking for. He tossed the sword away and dipped his gauntlet into the sack once more. There he is. With a mighty heave, he tossed out a man who made even gods quiver in their very boots. A man whom reality itself bowed to. An entity that death itself feared. A man who attacked sharks when he smelled them bleed. Out came Chuck Norris, the bearded Texas Ranger, cracking his knuckles. The Chitauri took one look at this deadly, almighty human and ran away, shrieking. Tony balked. Where the hell were you keeping him? Naruto only grinned. Places. You how? You, Stark, that's how. His glib reply was decidedly cheeky. That doesn't make any sense. What followed was an absolute massacre of hilarity and insanity. One the universe would never forget. Thanks for watching this video. If you really enjoy this video, like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification. Don't forget to support and follow Neon Zangetsu for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story link in the description. See you in the next video. Goodbye.